Welcome, everyone, to episode 74 of the Lookout Sir Warhammer 40,000 podcast. My name is Dan, and it is my duty, deliverance, and/or debate. I tried to work in the D's this time, I don't know why, to produce and deliver this wonderful show called Lookout Sir. And I'm joined as ever by my good buddy, Phil. How's it going, Phil?
Good. I like how you're taking all the credit for producing the show. It's not like it's a two-man effort here.
Well, you know,
I guess you technically edit it together, but produce it. I want producer credits, man. Come on.
What do you produce?
We produce it together by talking with words.
Oh, I see. I would say you're the talent, Phil. That's how
okay. I'm the special guest that's on every week. Yes.
No. You're far more than a guest, but you're slightly less than a producer.
Oh, okay. I see.
I don't know, actually. I've never really had to kind of give it thought. I apologise if I take too much unnecessary credit for, the work that goes into this. But, I will go so far as to say I'm always the sorry bugger who's, up late at night watching the bars move. That much I know for certain.
That's true.
But there we go. What are we going to be talking about this week, Phil? Other than, our internal debates about, who is needing to be credited for what?
Exactly. Well, we're going to be talking about starting a new army, collecting a new army, top tips about how best to go about it, and anything that's related. So, best ways to save money buying minis, best sort of hobby tactics for painting stuff up. We're going to look at it from a tournament angle, we're going to look at it from a fun, friendly, thematic angle, and we're going to look at it from the perspective that some people go, I want to get into 40k, but I don't really know where to start.
Exactly right. But before we do any of that, we have, of course, a 5-star review.
Peter!
Oh, hello, Dad.
What are you doing in here, son? What have I told you about wasting your time with these little plastic figurines?
It's not a waste of time, I like it.
How dare you talk back to me, Peter? It's about time you grew up.
I don't want to grow up. Oh, man, maybe there's something on the radio. Yeah, this is nicer.
Peter!
What's that?
That's right, it's me, the ghost of award-winning TV and radio presenter, Jeremy Beadle.
Jeremy Beadle?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Now let me tell you here, Sonny, my dad was always telling me to grow up, and I never did. And look how successful I was. So ignore him, Peter, and keep playing with that little plastic crack. And while you're at it, listen to the Lookout Sir podcast, which right now, it's time for the 5-star review.
Wow, thanks, Jeremy.
Who are you talking to with there, son?
Jeremy Beadle.
What? No!
This week's 5-star review comes from the good people of Norway via Apple Podcasts. Very popular in the Norway. Do you know that, Phil?
I do, yeah.
You're familiar with Norway? You got a lot of fans out there?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, this could potentially be one of them. This individual, whose name I'm going to utterly butcher, Sykepleierherremann.
Okay.
It's quite a mouthful. I feel like they've thrown an unnecessary amount of ease at this name.
Do you think they've done it deliberately to throw you off?
I don't know. I assume this is Norwegian for Kevin or something of that nature. But no, it's like it starts out like Skype. It's SYKEP as opposed to PE for Skype, I suppose. So we call it like Skip, and then an LEIER, so like Sykepleierherremann, and then Herman. So that's what we're going with. Anyway, this individual, who shall no longer be given a name until Phil has to attempt to say thank you at the end, says, good fun geek out, 5 stars. Okay, that's it. These guys just referenced Peep Show. So here's a 5. Overall, a nice and friendly show about our geeky little hobby with a bit of competitive edge towards the game. Great background track to the modern home office environment. 5 stars. I mean, quite a nice review for the most part there. I feel like we've referenced Peep Show a fair bit. So who knows which episode it was in particular that this individual came into contact with. Like Super Hands, we always try to leave a lingering sense of dread. Wouldn't you say so, Phil?
quite likely.
Are you familiar with that Super Hands reference, Phil?
No.
Can you give us a Peep Show reference?
No.
Have you got no Peep Show references?
I mean, I've watched some Peep Show,
do
but
you
not.
remember Jared? He had that build up of mucus in his eyes or something, and he had like a tube up his nose. Do you remember Jared?
No, I mean, if we're talking about the same actors, there's a better reference. Like my favorite scene when they did their own kind of comedy show, where they're dressed up in the Nazi uniforms, and they're like, "Are we the bad guys?"
That's true. That's the Mitchell and Webb look.
Exactly. It's very Imperial Guard themed, that little skit, I thought.
Exactly. The Allies have got all these wonderful iconic emblems like lions and eagles and all the rest of it, and we've got skulls. And there was something to do with the Allies didn't pick our uniforms for us; we chose the skulls. What were we on about? But there we go. Anyway, so it's very nice of Sykepleierherremann to have left us a lovely 5-star review. Obviously, massive apologies for butchering the pronunciation of your name. Hopefully that hasn't discouraged you from continuing to listen. But in an attempt to, smooth those, violent waters, I should say calm. How does it work? Like you're putting oil on like turbulent water? Is that the term?
I've got no idea what you're on about.
All right, fine. We're just throwing too much stuff at Phil today. He's clearly had a rough one.
It's been a long day.
But Phil, clearly, but please say thank you all the same.
Mr. Herman is what I'm going with on this one. Thank you very much. I am a bit dubious that you actually are from Norway because you referenced fivers. Now, you either got that because you're an ardent listener of Peep Show, or you're really English and you just happen to be living in Norway, or maybe you're using a VPN, such as NordVPN, today's sponsor. No, they're not. Shut up. So, yes, no, thank you very much. Well, see, Dan's confused here, but I've often referenced VPNs and he thinks that I'm secretly sponsored by them. Obviously,
well, I mean,
obviously we're not.
If there was any secret, it was a joke, was it?
It was a joke.
Clearly didn't work according to Tom.
There we go. You know, now that I've kind of brokered the topic of your potential lack of producer credits, you're now going for the jugular. You're like, I need to get my money somewhere.
Exactly. I've got to sell out. Yeah,
that's it.
Thanks, Mr. Hammond. We appreciate it all the same, whether you're English or from Norway.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Do not mind either way.
Keep it up and enjoy those Peep Show episodes.
Absolutely. Or more episodes of Lookout Sir, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. I mean, you could rifle through our back catalogue and find all of those Peep Show episodes, references, and enjoy yourself as much as you
It's entirely possible.
Yeah.
What I will say as well is this is actually, as I said in the last episode, now our second to last, our penultimate 5-star review. So if no one else leaves us a 5-star review, I guess we'll have to start making them up or, creating more potential ad revenue by, nonchalantly throwing in references to brands that we have no association with.
Or even use ourselves. I just see the ads constantly.
Yeah. Is that what it is? You fall to sleep
yeah. I mean, pretty
roll
much
around your brain.
Every YouTuber is sponsored by NordVPN, right?
Except us, obviously.
I know. We're doing it wrong.
They're getting a freebie out of us right now, Phil.
I know, it's ridiculous.
I mean, given that you're so hot on the topic, is there any other particular pros or cons you can see to the values of NordVPN? Why would you need NordVPN?
I mean, let's not go down this route. We're just wasting time. Let's go on to the next segment.
Well, yeah, indeed. But before we do that, just to say, please, why not give us a 5-star review, hey? Because, I mean, where else can you get great content like this? Anyway, transitional noise. We're going to get on with it. Woo! All right, now we've got all that out of the way. Let's start talking about starting new armies. Now, Phil, there are many ways, wouldn't you say, to begin the process of starting a new army. The way we have decided to approach this whole thing is essentially breaking it down into its varying potential forms, beginning with starting as a new player, then progressing, I suppose, into a more kind of informed, but ultimately generally looking to make a new army based on some level of knowledge, and then the kind of places that you go from there, whether that's more narrative based or competitive based, and then some of the sort of ancillary things that go alongside the whole experience. Does that sound like a reasonable appraisal of how this is going to work?
Yeah, I think that's the best logical way of going about it.
Absolutely. So as of this moment in time, easily it's fair to say the best and most obvious way to get into starting a new army as a new player is to possibly explore and utilize the more widely available resources supplied by GW in the form of their get started kits, right? Like, I mean, we probably can't start talking about starting out as a 40k player without addressing the various forms of Necrons and Space Marines that you can get at a bargain price. But maybe price isn't everything to you, but it's reasonable to assert from the outset that as a new player, this is probably going to be one of your first major touch points. And it's certainly something that the Games Workshop staff, should you be able to interact with them, are going to be promoting to you. So what's our general vibe, Phil, in terms of getting started in this particular way? Do we feel like this is a good way in?
Yes. I mean, in terms of purchasing power, is probably the best option. I would say that there's a step before this, and that's where, and it all depends on how you're getting into the hobby. If your friends have gotten you into it, if you're starting off on your own, or if you and a couple of friends are starting off on your own and have no one else that plays 40k. If you're playing, if you're getting into it because your friends already play 40k. So, for example, when I got back into the hobby, which was about 8 years ago now, I think, Richard had got me back into it, and funnily enough, Dan, you had got him back into it. So when I first started playing, actually, I played with his collection. So we did like a little doubles event, and I got to play with his Thousand Suns and Demon Army, and that was a nice way of sort of learning the rules, getting into it, sort of understanding how the game works without actually even having to commit to buying anything. So that first step could just be borrowing some models or an army off of friends that already have armies. I mean, that seems like the first step if you're new to it, but your friends already in the hobby.
I suppose that's it, isn't it? You want to sort of try and start to scratch the hobby itch, as it were, and you want to sort of start by, I suppose, experimenting with playing the game and seeing if it's something that you actually want to start to invest money in. And in the old days, the Games Workshop stores were really good for this, because ultimately you could go into the store and they would allow you to play a test game or a introduction game, as they were. And obviously in those instances, depending on the store, you got to play on some quite nice tables with some really nicely painted miniatures, and it was a really good introduction into the kind of elevator pitch that is 40k. And obviously they dumb down a lot of the rules for you and break it down to its core concepts: movement, shooting, fighting in combat, and all those kind of core concepts start to bed in with players, I suppose. The journey that GW will probably go on, if you were in the position of a store manager or just a member of staff in the general sense, you would probably be incentivized to try and convert that game, that introduction game, into the purchase of a starter set. And there's a reason why Games Workshop sell these things for as little as they do. It's because it's purely designed to kind of get people through the door, and to get people buying the product and starting to interact with it. But do you feel like many players who graduate from this style of product actually get really that much value out of this stuff long term? Or do you feel like we all just kind of accept that if you're starting out, your first few bits and pieces are just that? They're essentially, they're not really a full expression of how you want to adopt the hobby long term. It's just a means to an end. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a hard one to say because I think some people might, for example, you might with your friends split the box and go, okay, I'll have Necrons, you have Space Marines, and neither of those people might be that well matched to the play style of those armies. Because obviously you don't even, if you haven't even played 40k before, you don't know what it's about. You don't know the nuances of each army has a different particular play style to them, and which one of those is going to sort of tick your boxes in terms of what you want. So I think potentially those early boxes, that they are, like you said, a great value for money, but they might not necessarily marry up with how you want to play the game. So you might ditch it and then go, actually, I want to collect a different army instead.
Well, it's an interesting question, though, isn't it? Because do these boxes represent good value for money if it turns out that you actually don't want what's in it? Like, if it's worthless, if you're never going to use it, is that good value for money? And I suppose that was more my kind of interesting point, because I find a lot of people will probably jump in at this stage, but it's something to me that's always been really interesting, because if I can take you down my memory lane instance of how I got into the hobby, my experience was much more about, I saw Craftworld Elder stuff when I was however old back in the 90s, and I was like, I love how this army looks. I love the style. I love the visuals. I love the characters. I love the appearance of this thing. So the fact that there was some whatever it was starter set that featured orcs and space marines didn't really matter to me. I was like, nah, I don't care. I just walked into Games Workshop when it opened fresh and new in Salisbury back in the day, and I bought myself an Elder Dreadnought, as they were called.
That's
and
totally the way to do it.
Yeah, is that what you think? It's just like, just buy what you like, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways of doing it. One, go on gut instinct in terms of what you like, or two, do a bit of research, read up about all the armies. Like if you want to do it properly, have a look online. There's plenty of resources for free, like Wikipedias, or just even the Warhammer40,000.com, where they talk about all the different armies. There's loads of cool artwork. There's loads of photos of all the models, or not all the models, but some, the armies in particular. You get a good sense from that roughly how those armies play, not in a necessarily detailed way, but just a sort of rough feeling, like, oh, Tyranids, they're kind of, up close in your face, a bit shooty, but they want to eat stuff. And Elder, they're live and agile. Space Marines a bit more tough and durable. Chaos are like the evil bad guys. Like from that, you should instantly be drawn to a particular army. And that might not necessarily marry up with the play style that you want to do, but it'll give you a good setting. If you're not invested in an army, like visually, sort of, not even necessarily the lore, but I think that does help a lot. Like you've got to believe in an army and really want to play it. And then I think sort of no matter how good that army is, you'll still keep playing it. It's like, that's why I still have a Krieg army. It's like, I just love the idea of them. Like I love what they mean and what they represent. And regardless of whether they're like a top tier competitive army, that's sort of a secondary element to it. And as a kid, I think I went for squats back in the day. And I got a squat army, and I bought, I think, one of those plastic, it was like a big, almost square box, and it had like, was it 20 or 30 minis, or maybe even more, but it was relatively cheap. But it's like exactly the same model repeated 20 plus times. And I got that and eventually I got some blister packs, and eventually I moved up over to an Imperial Guard. But I think, I just sort of saw them. I think actually it was because I used to play dwarves for Warhammer Fantasy. So I instantly had a kindling to space dwarves. So I was like, cool, these are my guys. I'm going for them sort of regardless. And I think most people will have that kind of gut instinct in terms of what they want to go for. If you don't have that, because quite often I see people post on Facebook and other groups where they say, I'm starting 40k, I don't know what army to have, tell me what I should collect. And that is literally the worst question you could ever ask someone, because you're making not necessarily a lifelong decision, but you're making a financial decision that's going to stay with you for a very long time based on some random advice given to you by people online, and it's
Yeah.
ultimately it's like only you can make that decision. I mean, people can give you tips and advice or tell you how each army plays for sure, but really you need to make that decision for yourself.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think as fans and as players and as everything, right? Like, there's always got to be an initial kind of spark. Now, admittedly, there definitely will be these days people who are drawn to the hobby by virtue of its scale and its broader appeal, right? Because in our day, when we were getting into 40k, there was still a sense of community and a sense of kind of camaraderie around it, but it never really had the sort of scale, at least in the more kind of competitive and tournament-led gameplay that it does today. And I think there's a lot of people that are drawn to this hobby because of those elements as well. And I think those are the guys that are turning up and being like, what should I play? Or essentially, what's good? And I think the what's good conversation, or the way that you approach this, is probably in many respects the worst way to approach this hobby, as mad as it sounds. Because what's good in this game changes every 6 months, 3 months. Like,
well,
the
at the moment
cycles are
it
very
will
harsh.
be even quicker. Like a new codex is coming every month, let's say, and it's like that's how quick the meta changes. Every time a new codex drops, there's going to be a new army or a better army, and even within that you have different types of best builds for each army. So that's constantly evolving. So I don't think you can necessarily chase the meta, and I think we can talk about that more in a competitive sense. But if you're someone just starting out, you should be best to just avoid that completely.
I totally agree. Even if your aspiration is to become a top tier competitive player, I don't think the way you start this process is to start out in that world. I think you need to gain the more broad mechanical knowledge of the game and its, various systems before you then start, buying the most competitive options. And, I think learning some of the nuances of the game, learning some of the nuances of the army lists enables you to be a better player overall. And I would say that the thing that keeps you coming back is that passion and enthusiasm for your own hobby. And I think, honestly, if you don't have that at its core, you probably don't have it in you to stay in it anyway, I would say. I mean, you see a lot of people drop in and drop out in that regard. But I don't know. I mean, what's your vibe on all that, Phil?
It's hard. Like, I've never really been someone that's like swapped armies. Like, I'm not a Joe. Like, Joe has gone through pretty much every army under the sun. He buys them.
Yeah,
he builds them, he paints them, and then he sells them straight away because they're not doing what he wants them to do. Whereas it's like when I got back into the hobby, it's like I bought Krieg. And it's like, to this day, I'm still buying Krieg 8 years later. And I've sort of expanded that out into Inquisition and Assassins. And I've bought some Knights, but never built them. And now I'm doing a Marine army because we sort of, as a group, decided that we were each going to collect a Marine army. And in that time and space, I think Joe built about 2 or 3 different Marine armies, and I'm still slowly collecting my one because I know I go at a much slower pace, and that's cool. But I'm not someone that kind of gets, that gets frustrated or fed up with the army or how it plays, or for whatever reason just decides to get rid of it. Because I sort of think that's a bit of a shame if you put time and effort into building and painting something. Like, because I put a bit of effort into it, it's like I'm really proud of that, and so I'd never really want to get rid of stuff that I've built and painted.
Yeah. If I was to ask you, Phil, just for the sake of trying to give some clarity to those broader statements that we were kind of throwing around earlier around people coming into the hobby and people wanting to be told what is good and what is bad, essentially, or what should they collect. If I was going to ask you that question, what would you say would be your top 2, let's say, armies for beginners, and what would you say would be your bottom 2 armies to avoid at all costs for new players?
Okay, so I think the first one's the unfortunate no-brainer of, if you're getting into the hobby, the number one army to collect is probably Space Marines. Now I hear everyone booing, but they're like, boo, Ultramarines, no, don't say that. But I think the reason why is, one, they've got a really vast collection. It's the most supported army range there is within the game. It's like, it's always going to be supported. It's always going to have new models coming out for it. There's always going to be something to collect, and there's plenty of choice. Even within that army, you can have loads of cool themes. Like each chapter has a distinct style and look to it. Sometimes that's harder to discover than others, especially if you're kind of creating your own, or you're doing, White Scars might not be that obvious in terms of theme, whereas Blood Angels and Space Wolves really are, because they're just covered in bits that make it obvious what they're like. So I'd say that's probably a really good one to go for, just in terms of, it's also like just ease of building the models. Like if you want to convert stuff later on, it's super easy because it's got a large range. Ooh, if I was to choose a second one, more from a modeling point of view, I'd probably say Sisters.
Wow, okay.
Now that's more just because the range is just beautiful. Like if you want to collect something and paint something and have fun doing that, I would pick them. I don't think they're necessarily going to be the easiest to build. That might be a bit of a challenge because some of the pieces are super fiddly. But I think looks wise, it's like an army to pick for sure.
There you go. And the two that you would avoid, or you would say stay away from, newbie.
Well,
this isn't what you want.
Controversially, I would say avoid an army like Krieg. Now, the reason why,
stay off my land.
it's not because I think there's a few reasons. One, it's most of the models are all resin, so that has a learning curve in itself. And when I got back into a hobby, it's like, cool, I just used all resin. Everything was resin, and that for a lot of people that's really off-putting. They're like, there's bubbles, there's mold lines, you've got to fix stuff, and to an extent you can learn to love it. But none of it's really compatible with any other ranges if you want to kit bash stuff, because the sizes are all different, and resin and plastic isn't like the best fit together. It's a bit of a hazard. You've got to like wear a mask when you're sanding stuff because the resin dust is toxic. So you've got a safety aspect from that, and they're kind of quite small, fragile pieces. And the other one is that it's like a range that is in a sort of a state of unknown. It's like it's not very well supported. Models could be discontinued because that's just how sort of Forge World operates. So someone asked that exact same question today on the Krieg Facebook group. They're like, I'm a new player, I want to get into Krieg, is this a good idea? And I think most people said yes. Like it feels like they're in a state where they've just been rolled into the generic Astra Militarum army, so therefore they should be well supported. And I think that probably will be the case. But in 5 years' time, a bunch of models might just disappear. And if you're slowly collecting your army over like a 6-7 years, which is what I've been doing, you might find yourself with half an army. If you're going to drop a ton of money within 2 years, or like straight away to collect your army instantly, which is not necessarily the best way of doing it, but that does secure you in the knowledge that you have those models, and hopefully those rules will be supported and not moved to legend. But who knows? And it's sort of that ambiguity, which is why I think Krieg's probably one to avoid, just for those sort of risks and the sort of unknown factor.
Would you extend that to the broader Astra Militarum range, or would you say they reside somewhere in the mid-table?
I think, the thing with Astra Militarum range is it's very dated. So there could be a point where if you were to start collecting it now, say you want to go for, Catachans or Vacadian models. I mean, any of it, because like even if you want to get like some of the metal ones, it's like you can still buy them. Any of those at any point could be completely gutted but replaced with better plastic versions. They could do a kind of Necrons refresh on the range. And if you're buying those models knowing full well that, cool, this is what I've got now, but in 6 months' time, 2 years' time, these models might be replaced with better ones. That's everyone's individual call as to whether they want to take that, not necessarily a risk, but just be aware of it. If you're really passionate about Guard, I don't think you'll care too much whether you've got old models now and then even better models down the line.
I made that exact advice to someone the other day, though. They were talking about wanting to do Astra Militarum army of some flavor. I can't remember what one exactly, but I did say, you really want to start an Astra Militarum army like potentially 2 years out from a complete range refresh? I mean, okay, fair enough. We're talking in hypotheticals here, but I feel like in the case of the Astra Militarum, it feels like a necessity at this point that range gets a refresh very soon. But maybe it will, maybe it won't. And also, I suppose it depends on, you could say that about a lot of things, I suppose. I mean, do you really want to buy an iPad when a new iPad's out in 6 weeks, or how often they come?
Well, yes, exactly. It could be the sort of buyer's remorse, or kind of stuck in a constant panic of never buying it because the next one's going to be available in a few months' time or whatever. I think some things like, so say the Lehman Russ tank is so old, but the kit stands up. It's not bad. Even if they were to replace all the infantry, they might not replace some of the tanks, and some of the tanks are relatively new, like the Wyvern sort of Manticore kit. Wyvern kit, Hydra kit is pretty modern. Sentinels are a bit dated, but they look great. They're not going to probably change anytime soon. It's more like the actual infantry would change more than the vehicles, I think. Is there any other armies that you'd suggest you might want to stay away from? One more as a newbie. I think maybe Tyranids, just because I think they've got a slightly harder play style than some of the others.
You think?
I mean, I say that, and I bought a load of the models, and
but that doesn't mean that you can accept the faults. It's more about. Yeah, I think Tyranids is fair.
I think anything almost, in a way, anything that's very hoardy is maybe quite daunting as a new player. Like if you're doing Orc infantry spam, you're doing lots of Gribblies with your Tyranids. That's a lot of models to paint, and that can be quite off-putting. Whereas if you go for Knights or you go for Custodies, where the model count's quite low, it's much more, it's just easier and cheaper to get into the game. You don't have to paint as much up. So the kind of sort of reward factor is easier to get into.
Well, I mean, on my side of things, yes, thank you. So for me, I'd say probably the number one army I'd recommend to new players, quite controversially, is Custodes, I would say. And the reason I would say Custodes is twofold. One, they're always going to be good because they're Custodes, right? And like ultimately, the position that they fulfill in the fluff means that whatever rewrites and things are going to come their way in the future, they're always going to have a certain level of flexibility and a certain level of power to them. What's also really interesting about the Custodes range is it's really broad in terms of what it offers you as a player, because not only does it have a very good selection of Citadel miniatures, it also has a very good selection of Forge World miniatures. So you're given a certain level of flex to what you want to get involved with. But what's always good about the Custodes is, one, the amount of models that you need to build and paint and have are relatively low. The other thing, and why I feel like they're a better choice for new players than Space Marines, is they don't suffer with the same stipulations that Space Marine players have. Because if I want to take my Custodes as Solar Watch or whatever other names their various different shield, units have, I can turn up with the same painted Custodes army and play all the different flavors of Custodes that are available to me. Whereas that option isn't available to Space Marine players. And I feel like you could end up in a weird trap as Space Marine players where you go, I like Space Marines and I've painted them blue. And then it's like, cool, these are forever Ultramarines and no one else will see them any other way. And it's like, oh my. Whereas if you paint your Custodes black because you like the black color scheme on these guys, they're still Custodes, and they can be whatever type of Custodes you want because they don't have the same bias associated with them. I mean, does that sound reasonable?
No, 100%. I think there is something to be said about if you're getting, and this is maybe more difficult for a new player to do, but if you're creating an army and you're painting them, give them a unique paint scheme, give them a unique chapter if they're Space Marines. If they're Guard, give them a unique Guard regiment, because then you do have that flexibility to play them however you want. And that's not just from a kind of competitive edge, but it just gives you the flexibility to do what you want, make that army your own. You can create a fun narrative to them Whereas if you go, oh, they're Ultramarines, you are sort of bought into a particular play style and mindset, and you've got these characters. Oh, you've got these captains, and you've got Minus Calgar, and you've got your Primarch, which for some people might be really cool, but for other people it might be quite limiting. Whereas if you were to create your own ones, it's like you can create your own captains and give them an interesting take and narrative on them that way.
Yeah. But I think that's the thing with Custodians as a range as well, though, because they've got options, right? Like you've got the jet bikes, you've got the guard, you've got the Terminators. You can very easily collect a broad selection of unit types and play them.
Yeah.
And play them regularly and mix it up, you know? And then when you start exploring the Forge World range, now admittedly that's a bit of a bold step for a first army, but it's an exciting one and one that's available to you. And you can take baby steps. You can be like, you know what? I really want to get a Telemon. I'm going to get a Telemon. And you can experiment with, you know, the Forge World stuff as well. And again, I just think Custodians for me work because of that.
I think when Forge World is an add-on to an army, it's quite good because it's like, cool, I'm just buying this one extra unit. It's not like your whole army is comprised of it. So if you struggle with resin or, you know, that kind of extra effort that you have to put into those models, which is well worth it, I have to say, you know, I'm not, you know, poo-pooing on Forge World. But if it's just one model, it's a lot easier to do as opposed to an entire army, which might be a struggle for some people, especially if you're new and not aware of the amount of time and effort that just building models can take.
Yeah. The only last thing I'll say about Custodians and why I think they're also a really good starter army for people is they are also a versatile army that will and can go with anything. Like if after a while of playing Custodians, you're not interested in continuing to use them as a main army, you can transition, but you can actually sort of introduce new elements into them and feed them in. So if you start going, oh, I love Astra Militarum, I'll add this in, the Custodians still work. If you like Sisters of Battle, you can add these guys in and they'll still work. And I think that's the thing with Custodians. They're a good allies selection, if nothing else, as well.
Yeah, that's like the one benefit of picking an Imperium army over, say, a Xenos one, is that there are lots of allies to pick and you can expand your army. And like I was saying, I've expanded my Krieg to have Inquisition and Knights and other bits and bobs. Like you can slowly grow your army that way. I mean, Chaos can do that to a similar extent. You can have the Chaos Legion, you can have not quite Traitor Guard, but there are those sorts of elements to it. You can have Traitor Knights, you can have Demons, which is really fun and interesting. I mean, another element is you could potentially go, I'm going to pick an army, and this is a bit harder to do, but I'm going to pick an army that I can play in both 40k and Age of Sigmar, which predominantly is Demons, but you can specifically do that if you go, I want to play both systems. Kind of on the cheap in a way where I don't have to collect and paint two armies. So a demon army has that kind of interesting versatility to it. Yeah,
totally. And on that topic, my second recommendation for new players, quite bizarrely, would be Imperial Knights. And the reason why I think Imperial Knights are a really great starter army is because they're big, impressive models, but you don't need many of them to build an army list. Like you can build a full 2,000 point army list with 4 Imperial Knights. Like you can get like a Castellan, a Crusader, a Gallant, and a Warden, and you've got 2,000 points with just a few upgrades. And what's great about Imperial Knights is they are very easy for you to start to experience the game, because even if you're not doing the stuff yourself, i.e. you're not moving the smaller squads around and you're not, you know, playing some of the more kind of tactical aspects because you're the big stompy knight army, you're experiencing it and you're absorbing the information. And your playstyle can become very one-dimensional, but that is in itself its own benefit, because you as a player understand what you're there to do, which is to get stuck in and to smash stuff up. And I think that really kind of simplifies things. And you can also explore the potential of making that a Chaos Knight army. So again, if you are playing Imperial Knights and you decide that you want to experiment with adding in some Chaos elements, again, beautifully mixes into that. And I think that's the thing I like about Knights, is that, again, incredible allies. And can be added to multiple different armies, and you're always going to have room in your collection for knights. They're always going to... You may not use them all the time down the road, but you can often, if not always, come up with an excuse to chuck a knight in an army list, because why not, right? I mean, it is that kind of unit, wouldn't you say so, Phil?
Yeah. Like, I think there's a lot of ease to using a knight army. Like I said, it feels like you do miss out on a lot of the game in terms of like moving troops around, and but what it does is it boils it down to you only have to worry about like 4 units or less. So in terms of learning the game, it makes it a lot easier. I guess, knights do have some specific unique rules to them.
Yeah.
But overall, you, as you said, you're just condensing the game down to move, shoot, charge, attack, no psychic. But it's like, I'm just doing that with 4 big models. They're super tough. It sort of feels great to move them around the board and blow stuff up. So it might be hard to win with them, though. That might be
totally.
quite a disappointing thing if you're playing with them and you're just getting crushed constantly because they're hard to win the missions. But you might have fun just smashing your friends, and in a fun way. Like, I mean, you might have fun just doing that and blowing stuff up and rolling some dice.
Yeah, and what I will say about knights is I don't think you play. I don't think anyone should be playing the game early doors with the view of smashing all the opposition or being the best player, because you're just not gonna be. I mean, even if you think you're doing well, you're not one of the best players, because you just won't be, because you don't have the experience. And again, it's more about game time. It's more about just the ease of use. I mean, like, you can very easily get one of those like big plastic containers, magnetize the bottom of it. Duncan on the Duncan Rhodes Academy does an amazing video for how to magnetize like a storage box crate thing. You can get one of them, buy 4 knight kits. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not ignoring the fact that that's 400 quid's worth of models, right? Like, I'm not disputing that is a reality. Although after you get it on a discount store, it'll probably cost you 320 quid or something all told, which versus a lot of the armies out there at the minute, that's pretty cost effective, wouldn't you say so, Phil?
Yeah, I guess it's like, how do you want to look at building your army? Do you want to like have a 2,000 point army out the bat? I think that's quite unrealistic for most armies. Totally. Knights is like the only one that could do that with ease, custodies to an extent, but realistically you need to look at building 500 points, not like kill team size. I mean, you could start off by doing kill team with just a squad, paint that up, see how it looks, how it plays, and then progress from there. Crusade, slow grow campaigns, do 500 points this month, 1,000 points the following month, 1,500 the next month. That's a great way of building up your army in a small, manageable chunks. So I wouldn't necessarily just suggest going out and spending 2,000 points on straight away.
I mean, to be fair, we do probably need to put that in perspective.
I think with knights, it might be harder to do that kind of slow grow thing. It's like, if you're doing a crusade, it's like you might get maybe 1 knight and that's your army. But then, the opposition's only got probably a handful of units. So it sort of balances out, I think. Be an interesting one to see, actually.
I think in a slow grow campaign, it's obvious that it has it has some limitations.
I guess that's where you have armigers and helverins, though, to fill it out. So early doors have maybe 1 big knight and then get the smaller ones, and then look at expanding out to the bigger knights.
Armigers are helverins, by the way, Phil. You've got armiger warglaves, armiger helverins.
Oh, yes.
But anyway, irrespective of that, look, I think when it comes to armies with... What I'm saying here is for me, it's more about buying stuff that has long-term flexibility. And also knight kits. If we're talking about the hobbying side of things, knight kits are some of the most satisfying things to build and paint, because they're immediately obviously cool. And they're big flat panels with loads of space to express yourself. And,
for sure.
The guys at GW did an amazing guide to painting them, and loads of people have done that. And again, you can do a lot of really good work with knights. I really like
even
knights.
Necessarily need to be a great painter. Not say Duncan's not a great painter, because he is, but so Duncan Rhodes, when he was at Games Workshop, did like a tutorial on how to paint his army. It's like he doesn't use like an airbrush at all. He hand paints all of his knights, and they look good. And it's like I said, you don't need to be a good painter because the transfers that come with the knights kind of do a lot of the work for you, a lot of the heavy lifting. And it's like using transfers is a bit of a learning curve in itself, especially larger ones, but it's sort of so worth it on a kit like that because it just looks stunning, sort of even with like a half-hearted job being done, it's going to look good.
Yeah, no, totally, man. In terms of armies that I would avoid for new players, demons was my number one. And the reason I'd avoid demons is demons are just complicated, like really complicated. You've got, do I do a single demonic, god? Do I do a Nurgle demon army? Do I do a Khorne demon army? A Slanesh demon army? Do I do a mixture of all of it? And how does all that stuff work? And the thing is with the demon armies at the moment, certainly right now, the rules for all the different types of demons are scattered to the wind. If there was a book that needed to happen more urgently than any other, I'd say some consolidation of the demon rules is really essential because they're all over the place. But even if they weren't all over the place, there's all these different gifts and specialities and layers upon layers that are getting thrown at the demon codex that just, to me, just it's too much. I have played many an incredible demon army in my time, and me as an experienced player go cross-eyed trying to work out what's going on because it's too much, man. It's like, for new players.
They've got lots of psychic powers, lots of summoning, they're using sort of all the phases of the game, whereas, for example, like AdMech is just mostly shooting, or Guard is mostly shooting with some close combat. So you can sort of streamline what you get out of the game in terms of having to remember certain rules. And, as a Guard player, it's like I barely had to ever remember the psychic phase. I think it was only when I first got, when I got my Inquisitor, I was like, oh my God, I'm actually going to have to learn the psychic rules and actually do psychic powers.
Unbelievable.
I know.
The horror. And then probably my least recommended army for new players would probably be Genestealer Cult. Because again, you're dealing in an army that is layer upon layer of complexity. And it's just difficult to make them work even a little bit. Like, they are high skill threshold army. And even if you are a skilled player, you're still going to struggle with them these days because they're a tough army to love. And even if they weren't, they're very expensive to build because their models are pricey. So it's a very expensive army to put together.
I think they're the most expensive army, like point for point.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah, I'd say it's definitely
probably up there with the
Krieg by a long way. Well, yeah. Unless you're going to do Solar Auxiliary or a Krieg army, then yeah, I'd say. Look, for me, I'd say GSC are definitely the one you stay away from. I mean, if I was to really kind of go to the extent of breaking down a few more than just the two, I'd say for me the bottom two is definitely Demons GSC, but then above that I would say that you want to stay away from Sisters of Battle. Oddly, I know you said they're a gorgeous army to look at, but mechanically they're complicated. The miracle dice system, the number of different blessings and things you've got to remember as that thing died. Oh, I get a martyr dice. Oh, that thing did this and this creates that.
Yeah, I guess Acts of Faith is quite complex. The miracle dice is quite straightforward, I think, and quite a fun mechanic, and it potentially alleviates some of that early doors annoyance of the frustration you have at dice rolling badly. Because Miracle Dice allows you to kind of roll a dice, save it for later, and you can swap it out anytime you want. So I think that actually might be quite a fun mechanic for newer players. But like I said, there might be a lot of rules that is sort of too complicated to learn. And I think to an extent, depending on your audience, I think a lot of people will say, especially if they've got young kids that they're getting into the game, it's like, cool, I just need to know the basics. I won't bother about regiment special rules, doctrines, anything like that. Just ignore that. Like, if you want to have fun, easy games, you can ignore a lot more of the advanced rules. I don't know. I think in the Codex now they don't really break that down into
No.
here's your core rules, here's your special rules. But basically, if you just took an army and used the data sheets, you don't even need to use the stratagems, especially if you're trying to learn the game. I'd sort of almost avoid them for the time being. Just focus on the rules on the actual units themselves and learn those, and then add in the army rules and all the layers of those kind of benefits, and then add the stratagems in as well on top of that afterwards.
Yeah. But yeah, I'd say the sisters, because of the miracle dice and the acts of faith, the GSC because of the blips combined with all the other stuff. Again, it's just like, oh god, I've got to start to understand how, various gameplay systems work to bring this to life. And then demons for those same reasons. And I think that's it in terms of the free that I would definitely avoid.
Yeah.
And if I could add another to the free that I'd recommend, I'd probably say Death Guard, because Death Guard are the same as Custodians in so much as you can build a Death Guard army fairly easily because they're quite pricey.
I think Death Guard are in that privileged position if they got a new codex out, and that's another thing to consider. Is like, do you want to buy a Gene Stealer cult army now, like knowing that their codex is going to be replaced in sort of 6 to 8 months? It's like you could start collecting them with the view of sort of properly waiting for the codex to come out, and you just start getting some models that you just like the look of. And then sort of worry about how your army's going to play once the new rules are out, because some of those complexities that might put off a new player might be sorted out in that new codex, but sort of no one knows, so it's a bit hard to prejudge that, and that's sort of down to your personal view of whether you want to take that risk. It's like, I love the look of Gene Stealer Cult. I would love to have an army of them, sort of regardless of how complex they are to play.
Yeah. I think what Death Guard have going for them, though, beyond the new codex, is just the limited nature of the range, right? Like, you know what you're getting when you play Death Guard. You got 3 troop choices, a handful of elite choices, a handful of heavy support. Like, it's really obvious. Like, if you're going to take a troop choice, it's either going to be a Plague Marine, a Cultist, or a Poxwalker. If you're going to take an HQ choice, it's going to be a Demon Prince, or a Lord of Contagion, or some form of Sorcerer. Or Mortarion if you're going Lords of War. And if you're going to take heavy support, it's going to be a Plague Burst Crawler. If you're going to take fast attack, it's going to be what they call the Blight Drones or whatever.
Yeah,
it is, right?
like you've got a narrow view of models to select. And I guess sort of the downside of Space Marines is you've got so much choice. You might have choice paralysis, because you might go, I don't know do I want to do Phobos? Do I want to do heavy intercessors? Do I want to do regular intercessors? So I mean, that's the downside of that.
I would argue that a high percentage of people who start Space Marine armies do not use the Space Marines that they started out collecting. Whereas I would argue that if you started out collecting Custodians, Imperial Knights, Death Guard, as I would say is my sort of top 3 picks there, you're always probably going to find a use for some of those models that you started collecting. Whereas I feel like Space Marines just unlocks this weird realm of customization and madness where you start to become like, oh, I don't want assault intercessors. I want heavy intercessors. Oh, I don't want them to be blue. I want them to be yellow. Oh, I don't want them to be heavy intercessors anymore. I want them to be infiltrators. And it just keeps going into this thing where you just, for whatever reason, like prior to a few years ago, wouldn't even call myself a Space Marine collector. I've got more Space Marines than anything, right? I challenge any other 40k player to say they haven't got the same, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say at one point it was a modest Space Marine collection, but you're right, I've got tons of it now. I've got more than 2,000 points, if not
easily
4,000 points, just because they're quite point heavy. It's quite easy to get 2,000 point army with them. You
easily,
suddenly go, oh geez, have I really got that much?
I've probably got like 12K's worth of Space Marine stuff.
Ooh, that is a lot.
Well, I know I can field about 6 different fully painted Space Marine armies just from stuff I've bought.
That's pretty mad.
I almost bought that stuff of was it Tom from Rapid Fire Wargaming the other day was taunting, toying with the idea of selling his army on.
Yeah.
Oh, he did sell it on eBay, didn't he? And I was like, oh, almost. But I was like, why am I doing this? I don't want these.
Yet
more
another Space Marine army. I think the joy of Space Marines is if you decide you want to change chapter, it's like a simple paint job to recolor them if you really want to go down that route, which is all why I say, especially for Space Marines, custom chapters is probably the most optimal route to go down, or a known chapter with an unknown successor, like the Minotaurs. So I can kind of pick and choose whichever chapter takes my fancy.
Unless they change that in the future.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that was. That was a
time.
I was sweating profusely when I was flicking through that Forge World book to see what they'd done with my Minotaurs. Yep.
You thought you were going to get it both ways.
I thought they were really going to lumber me with some really naff doctrines, but thankfully, they did. But they just said they're optional, so I was like, thank God.
Hey. All right, cool. So look, I feel like we've addressed the whole point around new players relatively comprehensively.
Well, we can talk about we can talk about like the buying aspect of it now if you want, in terms of the box sets, the combat patrols, the old start collectings, which I don't think they do anymore because they've changed them.
I think they're available. I think the start collectings are available somewhere. Let me just check them on the old website. So if I go to Adeptus Mechanicus, they used to have a start collecting. Yeah, they got a start collecting box.
All right. So yeah.
So there are start collecting books still in circulation. They're just slowly being replaced with Combat Patrol, which, on the whole, I love it. I think Combat Patrol is great. In some instances, they get it better than others. Controversially, though I said Death Guard could be one of the better armies to start out playing, I think their Combat Patrol is awful. Like, I don't really understand why anyone would buy that.
It's just lots of zombies, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I don't even think you can legally field that as a combat patrol.
Well, that's something I said. Yeah, I think because of the rule, you've got too many of them for the amount of sort of marine characters and units. I don't know if that is necessarily the case. If you can run a 30-man Poxwalker squad, I think you can maybe get away with it.
No, you can only run 20-man Poxwalker squads.
Yeah, so I think you
can't break down the Plague Marine squad into two squads because it's an 8-man squad. Or sorry, a 7-man squad. So unless by some miracle the surgeon-y guy or whatever he's called happens to also satisfy the criteria for taking another squad of Poxwalkers.
Yeah, I think we looked at it at the time and it didn't seem like they did. And I think that's another thing to consider is these aren't necessarily like game legal detachments out of the box. Sometimes
they are in every other instance.
Oh, are they?
Yes.
Yeah, that just might be a weird quirk of the Death Guard rules.
They may have just made a mistake, right?
Potentially. I mean, if you're starting out, like, who cares about those rules, right? You're just going to play with your mates in a casual setting. Doesn't make a difference too much. Like, you don't need to get so obsessed with the rules to the point where it's unfun for your mate who's just bought that start collecting box, where you go like, no, I think you're fine. You can't do that. Just let him do it. Like, who cares?
Yeah, agreed. But yeah, because the Death Watch one is a squad of 10 intercessors, 3 aggressors, 1 lieutenant, and a Primaris apothecary. So again, that's a totally legal patrol. The Blood Angels one is the intercessors, the incursors, the impulsor, the aggressors, and the librarian, and that's totally legit. And then the Dangles one is the dreadnought, the inceptors, the intercessors, and the chaplain. So again, completely legit patrols here from all of these different guys, and they all represent, for the most part, really great value, especially for the Space Marine players, because for the Space Marine players, like, you don't need to play Dark Angels to buy Combat Patrol Dark Angels. It's just a really, really good box set, right?
Yeah, I think most people will kind of mix and match. It's like, don't feel fixated, as you say, if you're a Dark Angels player, to buy the Dark Angels one. You might find the Blood Angels one is actually better for you. And I think quite a few people would say that about the various boxes, is just pick whichever one. It's like, yeah, you do get the upgrade sprue with it, but you can swap out with your mates. You can sell it online. You can just give it away if you don't want it, or just keep it for that day where you decide you do want to change chapters.
Interestingly, the most worthless combat patrol for the Space Marines, I'll say it now, the Space Wolves. The Space Wolves are... I don't understand why anyone would ever buy the Space Wolves box, because one, unless of course you are playing Space Wolves, then fair enough, maybe. Because one, it comes with the Space Wolves battle leader, who isn't really compatible with any other army, right? Like, it's not like
because he's got the axe, hasn't he?
He's got the axe and the Space Wolfy face and Space Wolfy runes.
But do you know what? I saw, not to mention him again, but I saw Joe do a really amazing conversion with him when he was doing his White Scars, just because he's in a cool running pose. So I've wanted that model for a while, just to convert up. Because he's
you can have my one, Phil. I'm never going to use it.
Oh, thank you very much. Because I was originally I was eyeing up the Start Collecting Space Wolves, which is now discontinued, and that I thought was really good value. It was like 55 quid, I think they were.
Yeah, 55, 60, something like that.
For like 3 aggressors, 5 intercessors, something else plus plus that guy, and it's like I wanted the guy, and I really wanted the aggressors because they weren't the easy build ones, they were the full kit, and it's like I'd happily flog the intercessors and try and recoup some money back, and then it's like 20 odd quid for aggressors plus the lieutenant, and it's like that's cheaper than just buying the aggressors on their own.
But the reason why it's rubbish, Phil, is because it's got Reavers in it, and no one wants Reavers.
I do not. I quite like them. They've grown on me. I like the look of them with their grav chute.
I like the look of them. Just try putting them on a table and using them.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
That's true.
They are beyond worthless. Like, I mean, the thing I love about Reavers that's so funny about them is they're the only thing you can add to a to a kill team that actually makes your kill teams worse. I was like, this is brilliant. So if you add Reavers to your Phobos kill teams, you lose the ability to infiltrate. It's like brilliant.
Because they weirdly don't have that rule, even though every other Phobos unit does.
Yeah, it's so stupid. They're just ridiculous. But anyway, so I think the combat patrol boxes for the most part work really well, because ultimately what you're getting in those combat patrol boxes is about 500 points worth of stuff, more or less, on the nose. And it's a really great place to get started for a lot of people. Frustratingly, for the Necron players, they didn't get around to doing one for the Necrons, because I guess the logic is that you got all of the contents of Indomitus and the other Start Collecting box sets. But I would argue that, if you genuinely just wanted to get into playing Necrons, it is a bit of a bugger that you've got to buy a bunch of other Marine stuff as well. But
no, because so haven't they just announced on pre-order will be the kind of Necron kind of command units from the Indomitus box along with the Space Marine one. So you could just buy those bits as a sort of standalone, probably not quite patrol.
Well, it's not even close, mate. It's a Scaratech or whatever it's called. Overlord, which is the big wibbly Overlord fella, and then it's the Cryptek and his little minions, and then I forget what the
destroyers, isn't it? Like
yes, that's it. Which it doesn't make anything useful for you. And again, I think let's not dwell on what this. Oh, it's got that big spiddly.
Spider thing,
spidery reanimator, that's what he's called, isn't he? Anyway, so you've got all that stuff, which is fine, but for the most part, if it's available to you, which is predominantly a Space Marine thing, the combat patrols are pretty tidy. Outside of that, the Start Collecting boxes are also exceptional value. There are differences in terms of which ones are good and which ones are bad, but irrespective, they all still contain the majority of things that you're going to want to own in some capacity or some quantity to start your army, right? Like, at the end of the day, if you are starting an Astra Militarum army, you are always logically going to find a use for a squad of infantry, a commissar, a heavy weapons team, and a Lehman Russ, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a bit of an odd one, but I think you would. I think again, it's that thing of they're not the best optimal choices, but they're all almost like a staple that you could easily have in any army without breaking a sweat. Like, sure, like the commissar, maybe you wouldn't. Maybe he'd be an officer instead. But yeah, you'd probably always use those. I think the other good boxes are the kind of mini Indomitus boxes that they did. So you got the Command Edition, the Elite Edition, and the Recruit Edition. They're all like nice, cheap boxes of sort of a slimmed down version of the Indomitus box. So it comes with a playmat. It comes with some terrain of sorts, at least with the Command Edition. The other two sort of come with a playmat and like you're in a box lid that you can convert into a building of sorts, which isn't too bad. I mean, if you just start,
I mean, it seems a little bit grandiose saying that you're converting it, then you just sort of flip it on its head.
Yeah, you just turn it upside down and it's suddenly a building. Yeah, it's
like I've been transported to another world.
It's like a cool little gimmick, and it sort of reminds me of what people used to do as a kid. It's like if you are a child or a teenager, or you've got kids and want to get them into the game, that's a super easy way of doing it, especially if you've got 2 kids that you want to get into the game. It's like, here's Necrons, here's Space Marines, just go at it, have fun. They're possibly so young they don't necessarily care what they're playing with in terms of the armies. They don't care about the special rules or anything. You can just have good few hours of rolling dice and having fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. But I think that's the thing, isn't it? If you're starting out in a sort of budget position, the start collecting boxes do obviously offer some of the best ways to kind of get into it and to engage with it. It gives you a good mixture of things. Some are definitely better than others. I think, again, the now new combat patrol boxes probably represent some of the best value outside of, say, the Death Guard, which I've already expressed my concerns with. But, you know, when you look at things like start collecting Drukhari, start collecting Thousand Suns is actually a particularly good one. The start collecting GSC stuff is, again, a relatively reasonable proposition versus buying them individually. The start collecting Tyranids is one that I still struggle to understand the viability of, because essentially it's a Gene Stealer Prime. No, not Prime. What are they called now? What's the big Gene Stealer called? The Patriarchs are normally called. The Gene Stealer Prime?
You confused.
I've forgotten what they're called now. Brood Lords,
right? Yeah.
There it was. So you get a Brood Lord, some Gene Stealers, and a Turvagon, or not a Turvagon, the Morlock, whatever it is.
The Morlock, yeah.
The wormy thing. I sort of struggle with that one. And the Elder one's a bit interesting because it's literally a Farseer, a unit of Wraith Guard, a Wraith Lord, and a War Walker, which is a really cool selection of eldery things.
So, like, what do we have in plastic that we can shove in that box?
Yeah, essentially. I'd say the winners, when you go through it, is like you look at it and you think the Thousand Suns is a pretty great box. Like, the only issue with the Thousand Suns one is you're only ever going to buy one because it has Ahriman in it, a named character. So, you unless you're cool with flipping Ahrimans on the internet, it's probably unnecessary for you to get multiples of that. I'd say that if you're looking at Witch Cults, the Drukhari box set is okay, but only if you're really interested in that specific flavor of Drukhari. And then probably some of the Demon ones are pretty good value, but again, I'd probably recommend staying away from Demons for new players, but they are good value there. And then some of the bad ones are definitely the Nids, and also the Tau. I think the Tau is a very weird one because you get 3 Crisis Suits, an Ethereal, and a unit of Fire Warriors, and it's a bit like not really kind of ticking too many boxes there. But you know what you really just want is 2 Riptides. That'll do. That's a nice Tau start collecting box.
Yeah, I guess. If you're going to be that
from
guy.
A certain perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, financially speaking, I think it's a good place to start, and they do a good job of.
And I
giving
think,
some
as we've
info.
said, like buying them from third-party retailers, you always get a discount on them. So that's probably the better route to go down for buying
100%.
40k stuff. Like some stuff is direct only from Games Workshop, where they've got the little clicky icon on them. You can only get them from Games Workshop. But yeah, anything else, sort of, if you're trying to save money, get it from a third party. If you want a specific model or unit, you can sometimes buy splits via eBay. That's reasonably good value, not necessarily the best. But for example, if you go, I want the Indomitus Chaplain, until that new sprue comes out, you can't buy that chaplain anywhere, but someone will be selling it on eBay, for example. So if you are wanting specific characters and stuff like that, that might be a better route to go down. It's not necessarily great in terms of secondhand stuff. Obviously, that is an option as well. I've seen people sort of do restoration projects where they've gone, I've bought a kind of badly painted army on eBay, and I've either spruced it up just by finishing it off, or I've stripped it down and repainted it and sort of rediscovered its beauty underneath all that clumpy paint. So there are ways of doing it, because you can get bargains on eBay, but sometimes I personally steer clear of stuff that's pre-built. I always go for like new on sprue, because my standards of how I like to paint and build minis is very different to other people's standards. And sometimes I've just seen glue, like super glue, all over the model, and it's like, oh, I can't really do anything with this except painstakingly scrape it all off, or just ditch that bit of the model, for example. So
the only stuff I buy off of eBay are old metal sculpts that I know that you can just chuck in some Dettol and strip really easily. And that also don't retain any, because one of the things I discovered when you started Dettoling plastic minis is it does get the paint off, but it takes a very long time. In fact, almost never gets the aroma of Dettol out of the plastic. It's always like you always open the figure case to your formerly Dettoled army. You're like, oh god. So
I use isopropyl alcohol. You need to use 95% plus, but it strips the minis within 15 minutes. It's really good on resin and plastic. You need to be a bit careful that you don't just leave it in there for hours, because I think with resin, it makes it go soft and bendy, and I think it will melt plastic over time. But if you do it for like 15 minutes and then scrub it with a brush, it gets 90% of it off, and that's good enough in terms of painting it up and just spraying it again. In terms of metal, it just completely gets rid of everything, because you can leave that in there much longer and it doesn't matter.
I've left some miniatures probably in the garage in Dettol for like 6 months. I probably need to do something about that. Probably need to remember they're there and go and do something. Anyway, there you go. So look, from a value perspective, seek out third parties, look at eBay options, look at trading groups as well are always really interesting. There are a number of people who going on to selling and buying groups on Facebook and other social media platforms. So they're really good places to kind of get involved. And again, another good place to kind of engage with the community in the general sense.
There's another really good one on Facebook, which is, I think it's called something like the Loot Group. So it's what they do is it's to do with getting special edition minis. So you've got a store opening somewhere where they do the store anniversary model. You might not live anywhere remotely near a store where you can get this store anniversary model, but in this loot group, basically someone will go to a store and be like, oh, I'm going here, who would like one? And they pretty much, I think the rules are you got to pay, you got to charge face value for the model plus postage and packaging, so people aren't marking them up, they're not scalping, which is where they're charging crazy prices for it. So you can buy some of these rarer models at a fair price, which I think is a really good way of getting them. I think if you're starting out, I would avoid buying anything that's like special edition or collectors or anything like that. Just get the bog standard minis, and once you get invested into an army, then look at buying sort of the limited edition stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. Cool. All right. So I reckon that's probably enough about all of that. Why don't we talk about starting a new army as an established player, someone like you and me, Phil, who know what we're doing, theoretically. How do we go about starting a new army? What's the catalyst for you, Phil, when it comes to new armies?
I think there's a bunch of different reasons. So, for example, when we were doing the Space Marines one, it was a challenge set down for our whole group as something to do as a nice kind of collaborative project where we're each having our own Space Marine army. So that was the initial reason behind it. And then the other reasons that I have that then get kind of layered onto, we're doing Space Marines, are we? Great. All right, this is what I'm doing next, is finding a chapter that I'm really going to be interested in. Taking an army that's reasonably competitive, so I can at least take it to tournaments, not necessarily like be the best tournament player, but just go to events like Warhammer World and not get smashed. So that's another reason. And then the last one is I want to have an army that's probably either got lots of conversions in it or at least well painted, or as best as I can paint it, so I can try and aim for a painting award of some kind when I go to these events, because that's always my goal, is to get in the cabinet at Warhammer World to get like a best army nomination. So I managed to win one once, and I got nominated I think twice in total. So that sort of thing is what I sort of focus on when I go to events, because as someone who's not necessarily the best player, or at least taking not the best army, that's something you can always try and achieve no matter how good or bad you are at the actual gaming side of it. And I kind of get more probably enjoyment out of the hobby, kind of converting, painting and stuff like that, than just playing the game. So those are the sorts of things I look for. And then I guess as part of that, you can go, how do I, not necessarily game the system, but how do I want to try and get these, get the attention of voters, for example, in terms of the painting awards? Do I want to have some really nice conversions, or do I want to, what do I want to add to my army that just makes it interesting to look at and different from a standard Space Marine army?
Yeah. For me, quite to the contrary, it's more about expressing different gameplay styles and exploring different gameplay mechanics. So often for me, when it comes to starting a new army, my first point of reference is very much around what it is that I want to be able to, express on the tabletop and what I'm looking for mechanically. So for me, it's much more about the spark of being able to utilize or, facilitate certain combinations, or to bring in sort of interesting ideas that I can kind of realize in the game, and expressing and exploring whether or not those are actually, tactically viable or even just interesting from a gameplay perspective. I have always been someone who has sought to, not follow the established meta, but try and innovate and bring new ideas to the table, and that's really been a driving force between the way that I've played. Probably the most consistent thing that's influenced my army decisions has been local metas and local competitive scenes. So it's more about building things that are able to perform well within a certain local scene, or just are able to, do things that people aren't expecting week in, week out. So bringing some fun gimmicks and doing stuff like that. So to that end, I've really enjoyed, expressing myself predominantly through the Xenos range that is the Elder. I always find that there's a lot of really interesting creative flavor in that army list, and something that I can often go back to. But, equally, I've in the last few years started a multitude of different lists, from Imperial Knights to Chaos Space Marines to Custodes, all these different things that I've kind of added into my collection. And a lot of it just comes from gameplay, I suppose. And for me, when I start, and I don't know about you, Phil, but this is for me, when I start, I really start at the list writing process. Like, list writing for me is where I begin. And normally my list writing process begins around putting in the stuff that I really want and then filling in the blanks is my method. What am I looking to bring? What is my wombo combo or my gimmicky addition? Like, maybe in 8th edition, it could have been those little worms that I wouldn't shut up about, Phil. How do I make an army
the
list that
worms.
uses worms?
Those Blackstone Fortress worms.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
True.
And that was my obsession. It was coming up with lists that had worms in it.
Or 5 flyers.
Or 5 flyers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was obviously. Well, the flyer thing was always a really funny one because I remember picking up the phone to Adam to express how excited I was that I worked out that you could exploit the flyers in the, I think it was the chapter approved 2018 edition of 40K. And I was like, "Oh my god!
It's when they changed boots on the ground, so you didn't automatically lose for just having flyers."
Yeah. So that's when I started exploiting that aspect of it. And it was a really funny conversation with Adam because I said to him, like, I've got a really amazing idea for an army list. I don't think anyone's worked it out. And he's like, what is it? Is it lots of flyers? And I was like, how did you know I was going to say lots of flyers? It just won this tournament this weekend. And I was like, oh. Well, at least I'm onto a good idea.
That's true.
But anyway, yeah. But yeah, much for me, it's about what I want to put in, what stuff I want to put into the list, and then I fill it out. And then normally the stuff I fill out with is more about utility and building in some of the broader functions. But again, a lot of it's built around ideas that are very gameplay centric. Like I'm not really thinking about trying to express a creative idea from a more kind of fluff perspective. I'm trying to think about, cool, this will be fun to play, but I can't just do this in isolation. What plugs the holes? So if I'm going to bring 5 flyers, for example, what complements 5 flyers within the gameplay system so as I'm not overly exposed, so as that damage output is compensated with other flexibility that enables me to post wins. So that's broadly speaking my approach. I guess I'll get into it in a moment, but I want to hear Phil's counter position because I assume he's very much the opposite, right, mate?
Yeah. I think you are right to an extent. If I'm looking at going to an event or something, then I'd go, what kind of cool combos can I take for my army? And how is that going to work? But obviously, if you're starting out from scratch, it's like I'll probably look at it more from a thematic element of what do I want to do? Do I want to take an all tank army? It's like that might be strong rules wise, but even if it's not, that might be something that I want to do. Or do I want a cool core to my army that I can then, as you say, expand upon later on? So I've then got the tactical flexibility of taking some tanks, some infantry, some flyers, whatever it might be. I can kind of pick and choose. And I guess that's one thing to think about when you're creating an army list is like, and I think there's a famous White Dwarf sort of snippet from an article from back in the day, old style White Dwarf. And it was about a guy, and he's basically saying, when building an army list, write a 2,000 point list, build it, paint it, play it every single game. Don't change your list. Don't change your war gear. Have that as your story, as your army, and just play that one army again and again. And sort of thematically, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess that's sort of now being replicated by Crusade, where you can kind of take that one army and you can keep playing it. Sort of makes sense from an ease of gameplay. It makes you very good with that army, because even if you've got a bad army, you can be good at it because you know it in and out. And it also makes sense from a monetary point of view. If you're not constantly having to chase a meta, you're not constantly having to buy new units, you're not constantly having, so as you say, have a 14,000 point Space Marine army just to play 2,000 point games, which sort of seems madness. So I think there's definitely that sort of aspect that you can look at a list. I think, as you're saying about when it comes to list building, it's like how do you think the best way is to go about it? Do you think you should always go, I'm going to take a battalion, I'm going to take an HQ or 2 HQs and 3 troops choices as my minimum, as my core for my army? Because I think historically in 8th edition, everyone did that because of the way CPs worked. And I think people are still probably in that mindset, even though you can now go, I'm actually going to take a Vanguard detachment, because there's less of a downside to taking these other detachments. You're not necessarily having to be funneled down the battalion routes. But what do you think on that? Do you think you should still take a battalion as like your core centerpiece for your army?
So the army lists that I've always been most competitive with and won most of the tournaments I've played with ignored that system. Like I never was the player that brought the battalion. Almost never anyway. I ended up doing it in a couple events because of some certain combinations that I was able to gain access to. And also at one point there was just a really cheap troop choice that made sense. But yeah, typically I would abandon my starting point is always the big idea the because most armies have one or two major gimmicks, right? Like, so when you think about your Krieg armies, right, your major gimmick from the outset is probably twofold. In fact, it's threefold for Krieg, I would say. When you're starting with Krieg, you're saying to yourself, I've got three different various options. I can hoard up like a loon. I can take a big thing and complement it with some smaller things. Or I'm going to take exploit Death Riders and go aggressive and then use that as a bit of a tar pit to enable board control. So you're looking at it and you think to yourself, once you've got that familiarity with the army, you go, oh, cool, this is the sorts of gimmicks that I want to exploit. And then you expand upon that idea, right? As a competitive tournament mindset, you're not going to ever want to just go all in on one of those ideas, because the minute you bring free Stormlords or whatever they were called, what's the one with the volcano cap? Shadow Swords, thank you. The minute you bring three of them, you're so one-dimensional that you're always going to have matchup issues. But you know, you will debate. Okay, cool. Do I take one Shadow Sword? Do I not take the Shadow Sword? And then I counteract with these things. But again, there's usually a central idea to the list when you're looking at it. So, say for example, with you know, an idea like my old Elder army, it was the multiple flyers. Well, that was all built around the devastation and the awesome kind of board supremacy that those flyers gave me. The fact that they had incredible damage output with limited retaliation available. But then the question mark became, okay, cool. Well, if I've got to take these, what is their biggest weakness, and what else do I add within my limited selection to complement that most efficiently? And I think that's where you start to kind of create the interesting lists, because not unless you play a very specific form of game with a very specific type of terrain and a very specific type of way, there is no truly optimal army for 40k. And I think that's a good thing, but I think it becomes a case of player experience and knowledge about your lists and where your weaknesses are and how you kind of compensate for those. But yeah, so for me, I wouldn't start with the battalion. I wouldn't start going, okay, cool, this is my HQs and these are my free troop choices. Now let's build what I want. I'd start with what I want, and then I try and make it work. So one of the army lists I've been working on quite rigorously for this edition is my vintage Craftworld army that I shared with the guys earlier today. My vintage Craftworld army is terrible objectively, but I set out to make an army list that featured all of the original Phoenix Lords, at least one of their Aspect Warrior units, and an Avatar, because this was essentially the army of my childhood dreams. So I'm like, cool, how do I make that reality in 9th edition? So I put all the stuff into what's it called now? What's it called when you're an army list, but it's anything goes? Was it unaligned? Not unaligned. What was it called?
Sort of like open.
Oh, open or whatever it was. Yeah, where you put it in a big. You put all the stuff in a big pot, and you realize how many points it is, and then you try and work out where you can put it. So in order to get this army list to work, I had to take one battalion, one vanguard detachment, and one patrol, so as I could get enough HQ slots to put everything in. And then also field all the other bits and pieces. But it began with, I need to take 7 HQ choices. How do I do it? and then it built from there.
That's a lot of HQ choices.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you know, you got the 6 Phoenix Lords and the Avatar. So it's like, okay, cool. Well, I need at least one patrol because that's 3 HQ choices. One patrol. One battalion because that's 3 HQ choices. One patrol because that's 2, and it's the cheapest detachment that I can take. And then it was like, well, most of this stuff is elite, so I'll take a Vanguard, which is another 2 HQ. And then, then the army like builds out of there. But the beginning of the process was very much I want all 6 Phoenix Lords and an Avatar. How do I make that happen? And then the list that I've come up with off the back of it, I'm pretty happy with. It's never going to win in a competitive setting, but as a fluffy, fun army list, it does what I want it to do. And it achieved that because I started with the impossible, and then what seemed like the impossible, but then forged a meaningful way, or not meaningful, but an actual way of using it out of the absurdity of I want to field this many HQ choices. And that was an interesting exercise because there was a time where I thought I wasn't going to be able to do it, but then I was like, no, I figured it out, and I have it as a legit 2,000 point army that I'm hoping to field soon.
Nice. Well, it's good that you've gone down that kind of non-competitive route with that list, and I guess that's because that's your goal with it. It's sort of like a secondary army. It's like you've got other armies you can take to tournaments, but then why not? And I think that kind of retro hammer army is kind of in vogue at the moment. Lots of people are doing it, and they've got that nostalgia bug for metal minis and wanting to create those kind of armies. I mean, if I dug out some of my old minis, like I've got an old metal guard army, I've got an old metal and plastic squat army, I'd quite happily one day paint them back up to like a decent standard and do those kind of retro style armies. And I think that's a really good like hook to build your army, to give it like a central theme. It's a bit like so one of the armies I've got sort of bought but not built is a grot tank army. It's like I was like, I want to take something really fun that would just potentially give me favorite game votes or get in a cabinet. What's really silly but looks really cool? What do people love playing against? Orcs, and particularly grots. So it's like, cool, let's just get a 2,000 point grot army, and it's just lots of grot tanks, lots of grot mega tanks, and like that's it. And it's like that's a simple enough kind of aspiration and a sort of theme to my army, and it's like I can do more with it. I'm sure I could build it out into be a grot specific army with like killer cans and artillery and stuff, but it's like not as fussed about doing that. It's like just lots of grot tanks. I think that'd be super cool.
One of my favorite ways of approaching new armies is doubles. Doubles is, to me, the best way to explore a new army, because a doubles event gives you an objective to aim for, and it gives you a negotiation to undertake. Because if me and Phil wanted to do a doubles tournament, we need to make compromise, and I think those compromises are where the creativity comes from when it comes to list building. You get because you're challenged. You can't just do what you want to do. And from that compromise comes some really interesting creative ideas. I don't know. I mean, what's your vibe on the double side of things?
Do you know what? I think that's a really good idea. Because I think twofold. There's one that you don't need to build a 2,000 point army. It's probably 1,000 points. So that's half the size of a standard, tournament army that you've got to aim for. And the other one actually is building with tournaments in mind is really good because it gives you like an objective, it gives you a deadline that you got to go to, and that kind of the pressure of trying to meet these deadlines is actually really good for the motivation of getting in that shed in wintertime, painting your minis when you don't want to, when you could be inside watching TV, I think that sort of thing is actually really good, and that's sort of something we've lacked over the last year because we've not had events to go to. So I think having an event to go to is really good. A doubles event is super fun. I highly recommend. They're kind of the best events because it's like you're gaming with your mate, but still against other people. So it's like the best of both worlds. It's not just you playing against a stranger. It's like you're there having a game with your mate, but you're not actually having to play against him either, which quite often makes a nice change.
Yeah. And I think the thing is with that is it's more about the fact that you and your friend need to come to some collaborative agreement on what you're going to bring. Because at the end of the day, when it's doubles, it's rare that you have a friend that you can immediately like slot in with on a doubles perspective. Like, you know, like I've got a lot of Imperial stuff. Phil's got the Krieg and some other options and all the rest of it. So we've had a relatively easy time creating doubles army lists when we've done it. But even then, it still required a certain amount of, you know, communication and ideas. I mean, famously, me and Richie, the way I got Richie back into the hobby was through doubles. We worked towards a doubles tournament together. I bought the demons contingency of our doubles army, and he bought the Thousand Suns aspect of it, and we built the blue meanies, as we called them, and played them to death and refined them and built them up. But you know, when I started out picking up that demon codex to start playing games with Richie, I had no aspiration to play demons prior to that. It was just, I'll do it because it's worth doing it to help Richie out and to get him into the hobby and to give me someone to play with and blah, 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 blah.
Because
it was amazing fun.
That's actually the most thematic doubles army that out of all of our friendship group that we've created. Because pretty much every other event, it's just like, oh, what army could I take? What army can you take? That is, you know, there's enough of us where we go, oh, well, Joe can't team up with so and so because they've got different factions that don't align together correctly. Whereas it's like, oh, Tim can take this and I can take this Imperial army, so it sort of matches up and there's a bit more synergy. So you can normally work out your pairings based on pre-existing armies. Whereas that one, you've sort of done it the correct way, where you've both purposely built a doubles army, and it's much more in sync and visually themed with each other. And weirdly, that's what like the judges like when it comes to the kind of best army awards for the doubles. It's like they want an army that is cohesive, that doesn't look like two separate armies, but they do it to sort of a mad degree where they're like, oh, we want you to do the same basing and stuff, and then it just looks like you've just taken one person's army and split it between two people. But apparently that's what people do. Like not that, I mean, they take two armies.
Well, they do that as well, though.
Well, quite possibly. But I get the feeling the idea is you both build an army together that is themed, and I think that's a really good way of doing it. And I like the idea that we could do that as a group going forwards for future events.
Well, it's a good tool for starting new armies as well, is just to experiment, because you're making smaller commitments, but you're also exploring a lot of ideas within them and starting to kind of customize and optimize and figure things out. It's quite a great thing when you start working on those kind of lists and you really pore over the details and you start to get into the weeds and start thinking, oh, if I take this bit of equipment, this does this gimmick. I mean, you know, I always look back at that Blue Meanies army list and I always remember these fun little moments, these little moments in the journey where we made certain decisions that defined what it was. Like, for example, we were in a Games Workshop store in Windsor, and I was talking to the store manager, and I think the regional manager was in assessing and all the rest of it. And we were talking about this Thousand Suns Zench demon army that we were working on. And the regional manager just told me a funny story about how he was loving the icon of flames on his Thousand Sun units, because back in 7th edition, 6th edition, the icon of flames basically would put a soulfire token onto a squad, and if you rolled a 4+ on the soulfire, or even it was like a 6 or something, but if you rolled for the soulfire, it would either go out or it would cause the equivalent of a mortal wound in today's 40k. And he said to me something really, really unassuming, which was, we put the thingy in and it caused so many wounds in the game. And it was like, you know, he was bigging that up to me, and I was like, okay. And then I put it in the army list, and the transformation, as soon as you started exploring the ideas in the book and a lot of people would turn around to you and go, you taking the icon of flames? And it's like, yeah, because it's amazing. And they're like, yeah, all right, it's rubbish, because, you know, Math Hammer says bad, but you start using it in game and it just did so many crazy things, and you're like, wow. And, you know, by the end of that process with going through that army, I was such an expert on both Chaos Space Marines and demons that it was, a really, really compelling list to us for a number of years. And I think that's the thing, is just like that journey that you go on as you learn the books and you absorb more of the information and you become more knowledgeable, and that then translates into more rewarding gameplay experiences, which is great. I love it. I think, list building is super fun. It's a big part of the hobby for me, for sure.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Indeed. But yeah, so yeah, if you're starting out, I'd say put the stuff you want in and then make it make sense, right?
Yeah, and you can make that make sense in a variety of different ways. I think we're almost in a world where you can take anything and you can thematically make it make sense. You can have an obscure sect of Drakari that is built in a certain way where you're spamming the most competitive thing, but probably you can still make it thematic. Not necessarily to say you should, but I think you can do what you want. You can take an all tank list and that is 100% thematic. Some people will be like, oh wow, that's brilliant. Other people will go, oh, why are you being that guy taking a spammy list? And it's like, but to me, it's like, it's not a competitive list. And I think maybe that, sometimes it's the mindset of the person creating it is, are they spamming it with good intentions to create a cool theme and hook, or are they doing it to try and win the game? And I think that is sometimes a fine line between what your intentions are versus how you're perceived by others in the community, potentially.
Yeah. And what I will say, and I said this in last week's episode, I would also say that you need to explore your own ideas and to express your own ideas in the game, and not seek to try and just mimic things that have been successful in the past, because the problem is with that is the thing that won the LVO last year was consistently strong for about a month afterwards, but after it had been seen and understood, by the time everyone who was mimicking the army had turned up and started using it, one, all the best players had understood it and worked out how to counter it, and two, the people using it probably didn't actually understand what made it good in the first place fully. And I think that's one of the things, like, I've seen players day in, day out, month in, month out, buy the best thing from that particular period of time, and always frustrating themselves that it's never doing what they want it to do. And I think that's the thing. It's like, to a certain extent, you have to earn these achievements. You have to figure something out for yourself, because the number one ranked list in the world today is probably not going to guarantee you a win when you play with it tomorrow. It would be my assertion. I don't know. What do you think, Phil?
No, like, I completely agree. I think in terms of, if you're going to buy a net list, for example, I think you're going to be really disappointed with it after a couple of games, and then you're going to sell it or move on to whatever the next thing is. And it's like you're constantly chasing that meta. You're never going to catch up. Nothing's ever stable. It's just a real waste of time and money, I think. I mean, you might enjoy doing that, and all power to you if you can comfortably afford that, and you can paint that quickly or to that kind of quality. That's then great. But I think for most people, that's like the worst advice you can do. As you say, you can get good just by playing your same army and just be consistent with it. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the top meta, but you'll learn its own unique tricks that can make it good. It's like Krieg is probably like a really bad guard army, and guard are currently pretty bad, but it's like I can still go to an event and win half my games or just over half my games, which is I'm more than happy with, because it's like I don't, the fact that I can even do that is, to me, like, that's an achievement, and with an army that isn't very good. So it's like, and that's just because I've spent like 8 years playing the same army, like in and out. So it's, you can, once you learn it to that kind of competence, I think you can do quite well with it to a degree. Within the limitations that I've sort of set upon myself, like I'm not taking Bulgrins and stuff like that. All the good stuff.
All the good stuff, yeah. One of the things I really like as well, though, is when you start to kind of like get really, really specialized with your armies, and you start to explore some more obscure army lists and start to do interesting things with them. And I'm not necessarily talking about some of the armies that I've poo-pooed up to this point, although potentially Demons is definitely one of them. Sisters is not necessarily obscure enough, in my opinion. I think it's obviously understood what's good about Sisters at the moment. But like, there are some interesting flavors of army out there that maybe aren't getting the kind of attention that they maybe deserve. And I think, you know, there are some people out there doing some really interesting things with things like, I don't know, for example, the modern day Ynnari army lists for the Elder. The kind of things that you can express with that army list is really interesting now, because it's not as obviously strong as it was when they were able to do out of sequence actions. So, you know, if you started to actually exploit and look at some of the options within the Ynnari list and what that gives you, that can be super interesting. When you look at things like some of the more obscure guard regiments, or start talking about like the Inquisition stuff, or even starting to look at some of the more obscure Chaos Space Marine options, you know, there are some really fun, interesting things out there that no one will expect to see. Like, you know, and I think you can definitely do a lot of interesting things with that, because all the best players are bringing the obvious stuff, because it's obvious when they bring it, because they're the best players and they make it look easy and they make it look obvious. But I think where the kind of opportunity is for some of us who maybe don't sit within that stratosphere is trying to do interesting things with armies that maybe no one was expecting, you know. And in Phil's case, that's Krieg, because every time he turns up with a Krieg army to an event, most people go, oh, wow, Krieg, I've never seen these before, or I hardly see these, or whatever it is. Like, it's rare, right? Even with the relative popularity, it is rare for people to have played against Krieg prior to playing you, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, within guard circles, Krieg is like a niche. So it's sort of, I think people get enjoyment out of, one, playing it against it because it just looks different, and two, because it does play ever so slightly differently. Now less so because it's been rolled into the main army. And I think that's something really fun to do, is create an army that is unique, that people haven't really done before. So for example, I've seen a few people do it. It's like a Tau army that is pretty much a Kroot army, or a Tau army that uses all the kind of weird alien allies that Tau have access to. But most people just run big mechs and riptides, and it's a very generic samey list. But when you see someone go out and convert an entire army out of Kroot, that is like a show-stopping army that people are going to stop at your table and be like, oh my god, like, what is this? Like, cool. Like, and I'm sure it can still do well. It doesn't have to be like a super competitive list for you to enjoy it, or for you to even, you know, you can still win games with a, not necessarily a bad list, but an average list you can do well with. So, you know, when it comes to creating your list, yeah, think out of the box, be creative, come up with some interesting themes and ideas.
And one thing I want to address, because I feel like we're using very general language, and I think this probably is the last thing that we probably want to touch on, because I'm conscious of the time that we're sort of talking through all this stuff, and we've still got community questions that I definitely want to get to and address properly this time. When we say stuff like a bad list, what do we mean?
Well, I think there's I think you've got the currently perceived good units and bad units that the internet has decided, often for good reason. So for example, in a guard list, demolisher tanks are seen as like the go-to tank at the moment. You know, 2d6 shots with your grinding advance, d6 damage, you know, was it -3 strength 10? It's like, that is outright, hands down, the best sort of cannon turret option you can take. Obviously it's got its downsides, it's like a 24-inch range, but it is like an amazing tank killer. Like, that's what you take it for. So there are units that are rightfully perceived as good units. Doesn't mean it's the best. Doesn't mean you can't take other stuff. It all depends on, as you said, what are your kind of game mechanic gimmicks within your army that you want to take. But I think there are some units that are just really, that aren't points efficient. And ultimately, when you tend to say good units versus bad units, you tend to be like, are you getting value out of the points that you are spending on that unit?
Yeah. So like a really obvious example would be assault intercessors versus veteran intercessors with close combat weapons, right?
Or
So
reavers.
essentially,
Or reavers.
well, reavers are a different type of unit. So, but I think like assault intercessors versus veteran intercessors is an interesting one, right? Because a veteran intercessor is 22 points. A Primaris intercessor, assault intercessor is 19 points. So there's a 3-point differential between those two. Now, the veteran intercessor is pointed at 22 because it can be equipped with the same war gear as a regular intercessor, i.e. bolt rifles. So in the case of taking an intercessor with a bolt rifle versus a veteran intercessor, there are still some aspects to this debate, but it's definitely more pronounced in the case of the assault intercessor versus the veteran intercessor. So you've got a 3-point differential, and at that point you're saying to yourself, okay, cool, what do 3 points get me? They get me +1 leadership, +1 attack, which in the case of the intercessor means that your 3 attacks base, 4 attacks if you're a sergeant, when you're a veteran, and if you're a normal one, you're 2 attacks, 3 attacks, right? So veteran 3-4, normal 2-3, and then your leadership goes from 8 to 9 for the sergeant, or 7 to 8 for the regular veteran. Or actually, no, I think they're all just leadership 8 at that point. Oh no, I do actually think the sergeant goes up to 9.
Yeah,
anyway, the point is,
does.
At that point, right, you're paying 3 points per model, which across a 5-man unit is 15 points, to essentially gain 1 extra attack and 1 extra point of leadership. Now, objectively, that's fine, but you start to then end up in this point of, where do I start to experience dwindling returns? What am I honestly seeing the value of that increase? Am I honestly seeing my 15 points play out on the tabletop? And often in that case, you will argue that you're not, because you'll lose models on the way in, and each one of those models lost is a heavier blow than if you lost the cheaper variant.
Yeah.
And there are other kind of interactions that then start to make the thing less interesting. So, for example, assault intercessors have a stratagem where they can fight twice. That stratagem is not available to the veteran intercessors because they don't have the right keyword. So all of a sudden, certain tactical options are taken away from you. So at this point, you go, veteran intercessors seem great, but I don't feel like they're worth it versus the regular.
Well, yeah,
because they start to feel inefficient, right?
Because I guess what you're doing is, I'm with my veteran intercessors, I'm getting +1 attack. It's like, so are you going to use them as an assault unit? And then, as you say, you're comparing them against an assault unit, which technically has 1 less attack, but they have chainswords and they get +1 attack anyway. So then you've got
that's the same. In this instance, I would be saying they've both got the same equipment.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry if I wasn't clear about that, because the veteran intercessors can be armed with bolt pistol chainsword, but unlike,
No, I didn't realize.
Yeah, that, which is the way that when you look at the veteran intercessors, because they've got the extra attack, you start to think, oh, I double down on that and I give them the chainswords, because then I've got the heavy bolt pistol chainsword combo, which is then 5 attacks a man on a charge, and you're starting to go, ooh, this is lucrative, but you are a 3-point difference for that benefit.
Yeah, so as you say, arguably better, but as you say, you're going to start losing out on other things like the stratagem. The fact that each time you lose someone, it's a bit more painful, for example.
Yes.
Which you could mitigate by putting them in a transport, but then that's more points versus something cheaper that you could just go, I'll just run them up the board.
But these and the reason I use it as an example is I think it's a really good way for people to start to think about what we're talking about when we talk about stuff that's bad. Again, for example, another one that I threw out the other day was Belial from Deathwatch versus a regular Terminator captain. Now, Belial is essentially a chapter master. So, if you wanted to be a chapter master in Terminator armor, you'd be 120 points. But Belial's 140 points. And you start to look at him and you start to go, okay, cool. Why is Belial good? And you start to evaluate it, and then you count. You put that against a regular Terminator captain. And at that point, and then you upgrade the Terminator captain to a chapter master who's 120. Belial's 140, and he doesn't have the same kind of war gear flexibility because he's fixed with what he gets. He's fixed with his warlord trait. Some people out there might be saying, yes, but to make him a member of the Deathwing, you have to pay 20 points. But actually, if you're a Terminator captain, you have the Deathwing keyword by virtue of being a member of the Dark Angels. So you don't have to pay the 20-point upgrade that you do if you're not in Terminator armor. So at this point, I'm sort of like looking at it going, why would I take Belial? Because he's 20 points more than a chapter master in Terminator armor. But I'm not seeing where the benefits are. Now, okay, he's -1 to be hit in combat, and there are some other things. But for his broad function on the board, I can express the same gameplay. I can experience the same outcome for 20 points less. And that's where I'm sort of going with these kind of conversations. And that's why it's really good to get across the books and understand your options. Because often there are more efficient ways of achieving the same outcome. And efficiency comes at a price, essentially. If I can get the same result for cheaper, I have won out over you.
Yeah, like for example, so with Guard, for example, you can take as a Psyker, who I think is an HQ choice, and he gets access to 2 psychic powers. Or for I think like half the points, you can take an Astropath, who's a lot more rubbish, but you can only take 1 power. But it's like, I'll take that any day because it's cheaper. It doesn't take up an HQ slot. So, there are choices in terms of your list building of, is it worth taking an HQ versus something that isn't? Sometimes like you could just go, the Demolisher Cannon is the better one hands down, but the range is really short. So would I be better off just taking a battle cannon because actually I don't want to run my tanks up the board? Unless, of course, you do, because that might be your gameplay strategy. So there's lots of ways of looking at units where for you, they might be really good units, but the internet says, Maths Hammer says they're bad. Because quite often people don't factor in, people look at the raw dice roll numbers and they don't factor in things like range, which do make a huge difference in, what a weapon is and how much playability it's getting on the table on turn 1 or, versus turn 5, for example. So there are lots of things to consider when it comes to what you think is a good unit versus.
Yeah, agreed.
What other people.
The other thing as well, I think, in terms of bad army lists, where you start to have a lot of inefficiency in terms of the combinations. And by that, I mean that you're taking stuff that doesn't complement each other. You need to start to layer on things that amplify what you've brought if you have that option. And you need to start looking at stuff that complements these ideas ultimately. At the end of the day, right, if you've got an army list that's got extraordinarily high leadership, like Space Marine, Ultramarine Space Marines, for example, do you need to take chaplains with leadership 9/leadership 10? Because the core chaplain thing that most people like about the chaplain is he's got the leadership aura. And that is useful in a lot of instances. Or, I don't know, say the guard or whatever, taking commissars, whatever it might be, like some sort of buff. But actually, there's a lot of redundancy in that choice because your army more or less has baked-in solutions for that problem. So at that point, it's like, well, maybe that's not the thing I need to be taking. Maybe I take the librarian. Maybe I take this. And then what gear am I taking? It's like, I've taken this librarian and I've given him nothing but smite and other kind of like smitey-based powers. But I've got this hero over here that would benefit from Might of Heroes and Veil of Time or whatever. But I'm not doing that because I'm going to go down this path. But then it's like, but you're losing out on additional efficiency there because you're not using a tool within your army to amplify other aspects of your army. You're kind of missing out on potential. And that's where a lot of the badness comes in. And that's really is the difference between a good list and a bad list. A good list has lots and lots and lots of tools. It's a Swiss Army knife. It has lots of different ways of handling different situations, but different ways of amplifying itself, and there's layers of strategy. Bad army lists just don't complement it. Basically, it's the difference between taking an army and taking a selection of squads.
Yeah,
as it were,
I guess where do you sit with? Is it better to sort of theme an army to be like, I'm going to go all in on close combat and assault, and that's going to be my thing? Or do you think they'd be better off going, actually, I'm going to take a bit of close combat, a bit of shooting, a bit of a smorgasbord, and try and have units that cater for all situations?
Smorgasbord is definitely the way that I would recommend under normal circumstances. Again, if you're going to play at bleeding edge ITC, which is essentially now 40k chess, then you need combat, because that's the nature of what they've turned that game into. You need basically the best 40k armies according to the ICC rankings are fast, durable combat armies. I'm really hopeful that soon the community will start to kind of push back against that, because I don't think like that's a very pure expression of 40k. I think, at the end of the day, it starts to feel almost like fantasy, or Age of Sigmar, where it's all about winged monsters smashing into each other, which is fine. I haven't got a problem with it, but I do find it very interesting that competitive 40k at this moment in time seems relatively happy with allowing for the shooting phase to have been heavily neutered. Like, when I hear competitive players talking about how a good board should prevent you from shooting turn 1, potentially turn 2, it kind of hurts me a bit, because I'm like, I don't think that's 40k. It's like,
it is weird, because I think for us at least, normal games are 40k, 7th edition, even 8th edition. It's like, yeah, I can just target my opponent on the other side of the board for the most part, and I think weirdly it was never as much of a problem. It was a bit of a problem, but not anywhere near as it either is now, because everything's just ramped up in power. I don't know. I'm not necessarily sure what the best solution is for that, but as you say, not being able to at all shoot your opponent turn 1 like completely hampers some armies like Garden Tau to an extent. So I think you do need a good balance of, I can still shoot some of your army, obviously not all of it.
Of course.
How do you feel about like redundancy in your army? It's like, if I'm taking a tank, should I take 2 of that tank? Especially if it's like, or if I'm taking like a dreadnought that does a special power. So it's like, I want to take a Redemptor because I want to use Wisdoms of the Ancient, because I want to give other stuff rerolls. Should I take 2 in case that first one gets killed, or do you take the risk that unit might get destroyed early game and you need it for the synergy of your army?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a game of chance, right? So I think you've got to. I think there is. I think it's more problematic doubling down on that strategy. I think the answer to that question is not so much to rely on that strategy exclusively, but to layer it with other things. Like, that is one of my options in an ideal scenario, but it's not everything. I've got this, and I've got this, and I've got this. And in a perfect world, I've got 5 or so different things that are going off at the same time. But if I lose one of those things, it's not detrimental to my entire army. Like, I think there's a lot of instances where you have one character that is a linchpin for everything. And I feel like those are bad army lists, because you're not exposing yourself, you're massively exposing yourself to a massive risk. But equally, I don't think that, I think you're getting into a real inefficiency problem when you start to double down on certain things, like, especially when you're talking about, say, a Redemptor Dreadnought, for example, because as soon as I've gone from spending 150 to 300 points on what in a lot of games might be the same outcome. So at that point, I say steer clear of that would be my assessment.
Fair enough.
What do you think about that, though? Is that what you're aiming for? Or?
It depends. I think as a guard player, it's like you need redundancy in your tanks, because they're going to be like the sort of linchpin of your army. It's like guard don't have as many tricks as other armies. They're sort of, they just do kind of consistent output of fire with no frills. Obviously, you get things like a Bulgrin squad, for example. They're really good. And obviously, the synergies are astropaths or psychers to give them psychic powers, to give them a better save, for example. But you might go, do I want to take 9 Bulgrin? Like, that might be a bit mad. Whereas a 6-man unit with an astropath or psyker might be more than enough. Whereas if I wanted 1 tank, I like taking stuff in pairs or in threes, especially because you can squad them up, for example. So with those things, it's quite often worth doing.
What I will say as well, though, right, just as my last thoughts on all of this list building fun, stay away from ridiculous combinations, though, right? As much as I'm saying, like, you need layers, you don't want to have a strategy that relies on an absolutely absurd level of interactions, you know. Like, I always love when I was watching like certain content around competitive 40k, certainly towards the end of 8th edition, where, like, I don't know, the Chaos Space Marine book came out and people went, oh, the Chain Lord's a problem, so all you need to do is get this Dark Apostle to cast this power, then you need to put this psychic power onto him, then you need to give him this, then you need to give him that, then you need to give him that, then you need to give him this. And it's like, cool, what happens if you don't roll a 3 with your Dark Apostle out of the gate? Oh, you just command point reroll it. Okay, cool. What happens if you don't roll a 3 again? Well, that's not going to happen. Every time I've ever seen someone bring one of those insane characters, one piece of the puzzle doesn't happen, and then they're absolutely ruined.
Because I think every time a new codex comes out, someone comes up with a broken combo, and it's like, cool, but that is 500 points of an army to buff up 1 unit, for example, and it might be unkillable, but it's also only 1 unit, but you've spent like a quarter of your army to make that unit do something very cool. I remember
one game.
Oh, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I remember one game where I saw it was playing against a guy who used the Chain Lord thing. He comboed everything onto it. He got everything off and then failed the charge. I was like, this is brilliant. Like, it was so funny. It was like one of those things where it's like, I've got everything. It's like, oh, man. Like, just something goes wrong with it, right? It's just, it's so funny. And then he just had this Chain Lord out in the open, though. It's just like, Mind War, and then he was just dead.
I think even in sort of lesser terms of like following the trends, I think there's been 2 instances so far already with my Marine army where I've done something because it's it's the meta, basically. So I remember when I was building it and I had all my intercessors, I made 1 squad the Stalker Bolt because when they first came around, they were super good. So I was like, okay, build a squad of those. And now I'm a bit like, they don't really fit in with the sort of more assault style of my army that I'm kind of going for. So it's like, that is cool to have, actually, just from a sort of point of view of I've got 1 of every intercessor squad type, so I can pick and choose. But at the same time, it's like that one's probably going to be left at home the most now because it doesn't really fit in with the army that I was building, and I kind of chose it because it was really good at the time. But the rules,
I suppose, a workaround for that one, though.
Very good.
I suppose a workaround for that one specifically, though, Phil, is you just take that squad and then mix it in with some of your other squads and just be like, they've all got this gun.
Oh, quite like.
Because in the case of it, I mean, that's all right. But there you go. There's some thoughts and feelings on army list building. It's been a lot of us talking. Hopefully some of it was useful for some of you guys. We're going to move on now to the crikey. We're going to move on to the outro now, where we're going to go through questions from the community. Sound about right to you, Phil?
Yeah, let's give it a go.
All right. Transitional noise. Woo! And here we go, guys. The end of the show where we talk to our fans. Oh, yeah. It feels a bit weird, doesn't it, Phil, referring to them as fans? Our losers, as we should call them.
Exactly.
The Lookout Sir fan base, the LOS-ers, or losers. We've asked the question, how do you guys approach the task of starting new army lists? What would you recommend? What do you want us to talk about? What questions do you want us to answer? Feedback has been fantastic on this one, which is amazing. So we're going to unfortunately have to be quite selective, or not quite selective as such, but we're not going to be able to call out everyone's questions or comments this time around. So if we missed you this time, sincere apologies, but obviously thank you to everyone who took part and asked us questions, right, Phil?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's always great when we get some comments. But yeah, inundated this time, I would say.
So where do you want to start, Phil? Who we got?
Going to start off with someone new this time. It's Dawn's Apothecary. So they say, I decided that I wanted to collect Space Marines, but didn't want to build the same blue, red, yellow Space Marines as everyone else. So I took up some time to read about the more obscure chapters before setting upon my Storm Giants. Over the year or so, I've kind of been playing. I've continued to build upon the Force alongside a narrative. So my Force is a mix of models I like, but themes into companies, which I hope I'll soon expand sufficiently to field and as individual forces. Looking forward to joining friends in the not too distant future to play again. So yeah, I think it's always good to go for something a bit more interesting. And I think a lot of Space Marine collectors tend to go, I'm going to do a particular company, for example. So for when I'm doing my Minotaurs, I started off by going, I'm going to do the 8th company, because no one does that. No one does reserve companies. But also the theme of the Minotaurs is they always tend to fight as one army, sort of all at once. They bring their whole force to bear. So it sort of makes sense that you would see that 8th company on the battlefield as much as you would the 1st and 2nd.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think, looking at the more obscure army lists, or looking at some of the more lesser known chapters, definitely gives you a good inroad into starting a new army. Because one of the things that you often find about some of these smaller chapters is they do have actually quite passionate fan bases of people like yourself who have actually invested a lot of time and energy in learning about the lore, or expanding their knowledge of the background and what has been written about, or what people have kind of created around those things. And they do tend to have really interesting communities around them. I mean, again, and also there's a lot of opportunity for you as a player to inject your own personality into all of this, which is cool. I mean, one of the things I found super interesting about what you did with the Minotaurs, Phil, in your crazy obsessive way, was the way that you basically poured over all the literature and all of the documents that you could find to essentially establish some rules, right? Like you were like, what can I take? How do they need to look? What do the symbols need to be? What's the iconography? Like that was really important for you, right?
Yeah, I like to understand sort of what the parameters of your army are, and they do give that to you a lot with the preset ones. Like with the Ultramarines, are like, a squad marking goes on a knee, for example, or on a shoulder pad. Like, where do these all fit? With the Minotaurs, it wasn't particularly clear, but there were lots of things. So they have an awful lot of contemptors, but they have a particular type of contemptor where it tends to be a carrier's pattern assault cannon and a claw or power fist on the other arm. So it's like I wanted to make sure I had those weapon options available, but I would also magnetize them, so if I did want to swap them out for other stuff in the future, I could do. Or I also built I bought 2 contemptors, magnetize them mostly with that loadout, but then I also got a plasma one as well, so I could run one of them as the Minotaur specific character dreadnought as well, if I want to convert it up, because I wasn't a huge fan of the original model that they've done. And then with those, what I did is I'd seen it online on Warhammer Community, I think, where a guy had shortened the barrels of the carrier's pattern assault cannon, so they were a bit just stubbier, and I was like, oh, that looks really cool, and I want to do much more aggressive assault themed army, so having a shorter range barrel sort of makes sense for those. And then I went through and sort of poured over, as you say, all the stuff to work out where the markings should go, or where there's leeway in it. And I gave myself some rules where I was like, because Minotaurs are meant to be really intimidating but quite mysterious, it's like I don't want any bare faces. I want them to all have helmets on them. And that was something I also did partly from a speed point of view, because like I don't want to have I wanted this army to be relatively quick to paint, so I was like, I'll sacrifice heads. It's like if I want heads, I would have done a Black Templars army. Instead, I was like, if I have them all with helmets on, I don't need to worry about sub assemblies as much. I can just paint them as they are, be nice and quick.
Yeah.
And weirdly, that turned out to be kind of law correct, because in was it Regent Shadow, where Minotaurs do appear on Terra, they make a specific reference to how they never take their helmets off, and that was something I'd read after I'd already sort of made that decision. So I was like, oh, that's a cool little touch, that's a coincidence. So I quite like that. So there's lots of little things like that I went into the army to try and theme it as correct as possible.
No, that's really interesting, man. And obviously, for this individual, I've forgotten the name already, but the person who reached out and made this comment, obviously, if you'd love to see some updates on how you get on,
is his name.
Thank you. Yes, Dawn's Apothecary. If you want to share some pictures of what you've been working on, obviously that would be really cool to see. So feel free to ping us over some photos of your progress on all that, because that would be awesome.
Yeah, send us what you've got. It'd be great to see. Tag us in your Instagram, and we can check it out.
Awesome. Who we got next?
So next one is another new one, Tabletop Journeys.
That's not a new one. Tabletop Journeys has been.
Has he done it before? Oh, okay. I thought it was new.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, then they're all the same old regular faces now.
Well, let's say they're new, but let's not be rude to poor old Luke, who that is.
Oh, okay. So he's got a question. Do you think that the lack of long forecasting roadmap for future releases and codexes affects starting new army? Would you prefer if GW told us what to expect 6 months or a year in advance, so we as hobbyists can make plans? Or do you think the shorter preview period is more suitable?
I think it's... On the one hand, it's helpful for us as players to know what we should and what we shouldn't invest in. But then how far in the future can GW honestly say they are? Because the fact of the matter is, even with their rapid release schedule, there's only certain limits to the visibility. And as we've experienced with availability of the Dark Angels Codex, the Death Guard Codex, there is clearly issues with the release schedule and how these things kind of come to market, and things change, right? So I think Games Workshop would be creating a bit of a rod for their own back if they started communicating that far out, because I think, if anything, it possibly negatively impacts them, because you're essentially incentivizing people to not buy things with the hope being that they will, double down or invest heavier when, they've waited for this thing to arrive and it gets here. But then equally, you're banking on the thing that you're delivering satisfying that player base when it arrives. And often you can find that some of the time people are quite frustrated by some of the changes that have been made. So, a lot of the time, like, some people will be like, oh, I was going to buy, 60 of these boxes, but I've seen the rules now and they're rubbish, so I'm not going to bother anymore, or whatever. And even if that's not true in the end, because people understand and adapt to how these things are once they spend more time with them, it's still a bit of a bad look. So I don't know. I think the way Games Workshop does it at the moment is probably the best they can do, given the relative limitations of the fact that they are a business operating in the world where they have to, manage a number of challenges to bring things to market. So, yeah, I think this is the best compromise with the way that they preview stuff and hint to stuff and, basically give us a bit of visibility 3 months in advance. I think that's a perfectly reasonable amount of time to give us a heads up. But I think if they said, here's our roadmap for the next 2 years, it'd be like, flipping heck. Like,
yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but at the same time, Sisters, seeing the kind of like that was like 1 year in advance, seeing that develop, seeing all the sketches and the early 3D sort of prototypes, even though they don't necessarily do it justice, because I think some of those ones you look at them and go, no, they look stupid. But then actually when you see the final painted model, it's so much better. So yeah, seeing an army get developed like that, I thought was really cool, and I wish that they would do more of it. But I can understand sort of why they don't do that. And as you say, it's like they could quite often go, if you're a guard player and you knew a new guard codex and a new like bunch of units were coming out in a year's time, would you be less incentivized to buy into that army at the moment? Quite potentially. Whereas I guess from their point of view, it's like you keep happily buying your guard units and your guard codex and what have you, and then 6 months time a whole bunch of new stuff comes out that you'll then buy more of.
I think, because again, it becomes complicated, doesn't it? Because as much as it could potentially positively influence people's purchasing behaviors, it could moreover negatively impact this stuff.
Yeah. Like I think if I knew that heavy intercessors were coming out a year ago, would I have started my Space Marine army? I mean, probably, but I might have also held off and gone, oh, I really want to do an all Gravis army. So I'd have waited till now. And then by the time they do come out, I might have just given up on it and gone, I've been collecting something else instead.
But here's the thing is as well, right? What could Games Workshop tell you today about the thing that's coming in 2 years' time, right? Like, so let's say, let's throw a complete curveball out of nowhere, right? Let's say that in 2 years' time from now, they're going to do a complete range refresh for Drakari. There you go, Drakari, who only recently had a range refresh in Games Workshop terms. They got a whole new redo in 2009 or whatever it was. But say by some weird twist of fate, they've decided that they're getting an entirely new range refresh, right? And now all of a sudden there's all this new stuff. What could they give you at this point that would satisfy your curiosity on that point? Because all they could say is, here, this is something we're planning, or here's the name of a thing. Like 2 years ago, if I said to you, Phil, hey, mate, did you see heavy intercessors are coming in 2 years? What's a heavy intercessor, Dan? I don't know. Like, we just don't know until we know. And it's like, you know, and credit where credit's due to GW. I mean, like, what they did with Sisters was a very specific scenario, but a lot of work goes into promoting the release of an army that way. They've got to get prototypes, get 3D artworks, get things that they are comfortable putting out in the public domain that will be representative of the final product, you know. And okay, fair enough, they're going to put in there the disclaimers that this is a work in progress and things are subject to change, but broadly speaking, they've got to get that stuff approved by the studio, get it approved by, you know, all the other stakeholders involved in the process before they even just put it out there. You know, putting a 3D render of a Sisters of Battle up on a community post requires a number of approvals and, you know, behind the scenes logistics that's work. And, you know, they can't do that for everything.
An interesting case is Uriel Ventress and his mysterious head change. So for example, everyone thinks that they previewed the first one maybe a month ago. And since then, they've changed the head because it was so poorly received, because it was a bit silly looking, I guess. And since then, it's now a brand new sculpt that they've changed. Now, if you think about it, Uriel Ventress is up for pre-order already. That means the sprues have been made. That means it's been shipped from the UK to Australia and around the world, because that's how they do their global release. Do you really think they changed that head and managed to resculpt it, print off however many thousands of copies of that sprue, and I say print, you know, manufactured, and then shipped it on a boat that probably takes a couple of months? Do you think they did that all in space of a month? No, they didn't. So I think what we saw was a preview, like an early version of that model that internally they decided they didn't like the look of that head and changed that head maybe a month or two ago, but it probably wasn't painted in time or wasn't quite ready, so they only had an earlier version that we saw. That's my suspicions, and that's, as you say, they don't really want to be giving out sort of previews unless it is the very final version. But they have been times when they have changed stuff, sometimes due to feedback, sometimes just, you know, in internal changes maybe where they've updated a design.
But they are going to keep doing that, but they don't entering into a scenario where they're starting to tell me about what they're doing 2 years from now. It's just folly, Because also as well, it locks them in. Because here's the thing, right? Jez Goodwin did a podcast for Voxcast where he talked about making the Imperial Knight kit, right? And it was a really interesting Voxcast because he basically says, I made this Imperial Knight kit and I made a bunch of extra sprues for it, designed them, but we tooled it out and we realized all we needed was this core stuff to make the Paladin and the Errant. So we just launched with that. And then we got the sales data back, and it turns out these knights were mad popular. So then we spun on a dime, or whatever they say. We pivoted immediately, and the studio team, the powers that be, said to Jez, "Have you got any more?" And he went, "Yeah, I've got these bits." And then they went, "Cool, let's put those in production, and let's green light and speed up the process of bringing more Imperial Knights to the market, because it was crazy popular." And now they're going, "Cool, we as a business decision, we want to double down on Knights and give people more of what they like." But imagine if they were like, "Oh, we want to do that, but we've promised everyone, we've already told people what the next 10 releases are going to be."
I think you do see that quite often now. You see, for example, Sisters, you'll see an initial release, and then a year later you'll see like an extra bunch of models coming out. And that's in a way just efficiency. It's like, give you 75% of your army or 50% of an army now, it's totally playable. And then in a year's time, while they're also making everything else, they can then churn out these extra models. But also they can gauge interest in...
Yeah. Because if the Sisters range had sold poorly, you wouldn't be seeing that new Sisters stuff right now.
Yeah, I think so. I think it seems like everything sells well now, so maybe that's less of an issue, but who knows?
Not everything. There's varying degrees, but Sisters did very well for them.
I think So there was Sisters, but also there's the old world is the new sort of trial where they are showcasing units models in that kind of early concept stage and giving us a rough, this isn't happening for 2 years. They've not really done it for 40k other than for Sisters, so it'd be interesting to see if they will start doing these teases more, or if they're just doing it specifically for old world because they knew there was a demand for it and it's kind of just keeping the fans happy.
No, agreed. What's the next one?
Cool. The next one is from George East 26. Sounds like a new person.
It may well be. Let's see what they have to say.
He says, I suggest choosing the army you want to paint. In a scheme that suits you. I buy and paint the models I want to, not because they're new or meta breaking. That concept I feel helps, especially with a new army. Buy, paint, and convert what you want. I've been collecting Dark Angels since January 2019, so a year. For the rule of cool, and also because my friend, when I first got into the hobby, collected them, so I had to choose another army. At that point, I wanted to start a second army now. How do you guys come up with a new paint scheme? Do you follow the law or let your creative genius guide you?
Well, I'd struggle to suggest that I possess any creative genius, but it's usually it's usually just guided by I don't know. I mean, for me, I tend to start with like a core color that I like, and then I just try and think about things that complement and then build up from there. But then I also am quite practical in the sense that I also try and just take advantage of certain tools or certain things that can speed up the process. I mean, this is beautifully exhibited by the Games Workshop studio team, because so many of the GW studio team's armies are all based around metallic base colors, because they're some of the easiest things to paint and make look good. With just a few additional accents and a few additional like spot colors and all the rest of it. So yeah, so many of the GW studio guys seem to be like, cool, I took my thing and I made it metallic silver or metallic green, and then I did a few bits here and there, and then the army looks great. And that is obviously true. But yeah, for me, when it comes to like custom color schemes, a lot of it just comes out of, I don't know. I mean, again, I don't know. It's just, honestly, for me, I feel like this one needs to be green. get on with it and hope for the best. It's yeah. I don't know. It's weird, really. I mean, you see so many army lists that just give you inspiration, though, right? Like you watch the Astartes show, and you see those grey Marines with gold emblems, and you think, I want my army to look like that. And there it goes. Or you're playing at an event, and you see someone else who's brought an army that's, black and pink tau or whatever it is, and you think, yeah, that's what I want to do as a color scheme for my army. So yeah, you just steal ideas and lift inspiration from all over the place, right, Phil?
Yeah, for sure. Like in terms of painting, for me, quite often, so with my Krieg, I was looking through the artwork. There was a bunch of different color schemes that were illustrated, so I sort of picked one that I wanted, and I kind of knew I wanted to go for a grey one. Same with my Minotaurs. It was like, obviously they've got to be bronze and have red shoulder pads, but what I did is I sort of look at tutorials online in terms of how to paint those kind of colors. Or for example, the Citadel apps is really good for getting color guides and painting. So there's a bunch of different bronze or metallic colors, and so you'd sort of take that, do some tests, sort of work out if it's too light, too dark, whatever, just quite often I tweak. I basically find a basic tutorial online for how to paint grey, but then I'll tweak it to sort of serve my purposes and make it a bit more unique to me, and then I'll sort of apply that to the range that I'm painting up.
Yeah, I look for shortcuts is my honest answer. Like, so for grey, I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to paint a bunch of grey Space Marines. How do I do it? I'll spray them Mechanicus standard grey, and then I'll varnish them, and then I'll use this very specific Ultimate Models wash, which is called like dirt wash, and then I'll wash that whole thing with that particular weathering powder wash thing from Ultimate Models. Then I'll scrub it all off, because that's how it works with that stuff, because it's basically you apply it and then you remove it, and then it all falls into the recesses. Then I'll varnish it again, and then I'll put a base on it and be like, cool, I'm pretty much done. I mean, obviously there's other elements in terms of picking out the eyes and the guns and other bits and pieces, but the bulk of the model, you just go, there it is. And it, so I don't know. I'm just about speed over, I like getting some good results, but majoritively for me, it's just about getting it done quickly.
I try and there's two sort of reasonably quick hacks I do on both my armies, even though they're quite nicely painted, I would say. So with the Krieg, it was like I do a base coat and a layer via airbrush, and then rather than washing the whole thing and then having to paint the layer coat over it again, what I would actually do is I would just carefully apply the wash to the recesses in particular, so I can kind of go, cool, I've skipped over the need to repaint another like layer coat on top. Now, to an extent, adding that extra layer would give you, because it's slightly translucent, a slightly nicer transition potentially, but I think speed wise, while it's more time consuming to apply it to just the recesses, it's actually quicker overall, because you don't have to then do another layer coat on top. And then with my Minotaurs, it's like I basically had 3 different colors, like bronze, light goldy bronze, and then a silver, and then I've kind of did an interstitial step where I've mixed some of those together, and it's like I just airbrush that on in a zenithal highlight, where basically you pick a point from the top of the model and spray it downwards. So all over on like the darkest color, and then progressively lighter along the legs and arms on particular points. So it's got quite a natural highlight. And then it's like, and then I'm just doing some edge highlighting, and like that is it. So for me, that's relatively quick. You could speed that process up even more to simplify it.
Indeed.
So another
one more.
So Folk Storms is quite a long one, but a good one. So I'll read it out because it's got multiple good points in it. Like most have said, choose something that you want to do and find interesting. I recommend finding something you can be borderline obsessed with. which is true. He also says people also pointed out that deadlines, tournaments, or competitions is a good way to get it off the ramp. When you have a 1,500 or 2,000 points, it all becomes a tad more relaxed when you can add units more on an inspirational whim. Again, as he said, once you've got your bulk of your army, you can then just add 1 or 2 units on in your own time. He also says, don't be afraid to admit if something is not to your liking. No sense in killing the joy of any good army by doing something you don't enjoy. He says, I don't like tanks. I don't think they're fun to build, paint, or play, so I'd suit my play style to that. So he has a Krieg army, whereas mine's got lots of tanks. He's got lots of infantry and artillery and death riders, which is almost quintessentially more Krieg than mine. But it's funny how you can have 2 almost identical armies but be completely different at the same time. And then lastly, he says, but that said, don't just quit if the army you're enjoying ain't good. All the things come around. In 8th, my style of playing artillery and horses weren't that good. In 9th, it looks to be a bit more sunny. Try telling that to Joe.
Well, indeed. I think, look, I mean, beyond everything else, right? Beyond every other bit of advice we've given in this process, I think the most, consistent is just do what you like, isn't it? It's like, I think the problem is that if you're getting into this with the obsession of being a great player, I feel like you're probably approaching it in the wrong way, because, to be a great player of this game requires a certain level of consistency. And I know there are stories of people who joined the hobby and within a year they finished in the top 8 of insert important tournament. But, for the most part, most people don't do that. And, at the end of the day, if you think of all the thousands of people that turn up to competitive events or play in their, local stores, at the end of the day, if you go to a 500-person tournament, there are 499 players who didn't win. And more likely than not, you're going to be amongst the 499 than you are going to be in, that number one. And I think you kind of have to do what you can to kind of learn more and adapt to that reality. Because I think, ultimately, if you approach this thinking, I'm going to be one of the best players in the world, you're almost certainly wrong. And, I'd say focus on what you enjoy, focus on the social aspects of the game, focus on the fun and the expressiveness of being able to make something that you're somewhat passionate about, and just, do what you like. And if that's a grot tank army that's going to get its ass handed to it every game, great. If that's an army made up of, I don't know, nothing but not Victory's Honor Guards, Vespids from Tau, great. Just do what you think is cool. But yeah, there are some certain efficiencies that you can start to add into your lists as you start to learn more. Just read your chosen armies codex over and over again and experiment. TTS is really great at the moment for that. It's like Tabletop Simulator has been brilliant for trying stuff. So yeah, maybe that's
I would say that's probably the best thing it's good for. I mean, you could do something similar with your mates playing an actual game and borrowing an army, or proxying stuff, or just even playing with counters or something, or just saying this represents something else. Tabletop Simulator just has the advantage where it's all done on the computer and it's all using nicely rendered 3D designs of those models, so it sort of makes a lot more sense. And I'm not a huge fan of Tabletop Simulator, but instantly when I was playing my first game, I was like, cool, this list I made is completely wrong, and it allowed me to I could go back and change it and play another game without having to spend 2 months building and painting these units. So that could be a good way of, if you do want to take it on a more competitive level, I want to just practice my list first before actually buying the army. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that though, because I think a lot of the fun of it is actually building and painting for a lot of people. And as you say, read the codex. Like, I think there's a lot of inspiration from the lore and the artwork, as well as the rules. So there's lots that you can get out of a book to get those sort of juices flowing for giving you ideas of how you want to build your army. Yeah,
totally. There you go, guys. I reckon that'll pretty much do it for this week. We hope you've enjoyed that. Hopefully it was useful. We tried to have a structured agenda to the way that we wanted to approach it, but it's a very broad topic that is open to a lot of personal interpretation. And I think, it just comes with time, doesn't it? It's like the more you play, the more you understand what you like, and the more you understand what you like, the more you understand how and why you like it. And then you start to just expand on those ideas. Phil likes lots of tanks because that's what he's become accustomed to when playing his Krieg. And he sort of uses that as a pretty consistent thing that is, ever present in his army lists. I like mobile armies that are high damage, but ultimately quite fragile, which is why I always lean towards like the flyers and the skimmers and things of that nature. Joe likes whatever is is in his brain in that one instance, and then it quickly changes. But again, everyone's different, right? And that's the thing. It's but what's really great about the hobby, and what's really great about it is a hobby, and as much as winning games is great, building armies and expressing your creativity is equally rewarding and entertaining. So nothing is ever wasted unless you abandon a concept completely, I suppose. But most of the time, stuff comes back around. That's the main kind of takeaway from all this, right? Like, things change. So yeah, just do what I do: read and read, read all the codexes all of the time.
I have to say, on that note, like the new codexes, like I was sort of poring over the Space Marine one a bit more. It's like the artwork's really but the design of it and like the quality of the content is like, it looks similar to an 8th edition codex. It's just so much better. Oh yeah, and the thing that they've got right with these 9th edition books is it just lets you do whatever you want to do with them to an extent. I mean, Death Guard, there's only so much you can do. But like Marines, Necrons, there's just so much flexibility in those lists, and it's just really clever. They're very well made. So yeah, more power to them, man. I'm looking forward to seeing what the Drukhari get when they finally, get released, which is hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Yeah. So yeah, very exciting times ahead, I'd say. But on that note, I reckon we say goodbye, don't you, Phil? I know. Are we not going to do it? Because I realised I teased last week something about chaos. But we've run out of time again, so I just have to tease it again for next week, I guess.
This is going to be like the rolling joke. This is the 3rd week we've had to push it back, isn't it?
I know. It's because we
just say it really unenthusiastically. Just be like, oh, it's these guys. Move on.
No.
Or do you want to tease
I want a bit more of an in-depth talk about it. Maybe next week we do a full core rulebook thing, and I talk about Crusade. We finally teach you how to play Crusade.
All right.
I'm up. Fans want it. Let us know in the comments.
Let us know in the comments. Tell us how you feel about Crusade or me learning about it. But there you go, guys. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.